Sure.
You know, if you just mad.
Right. Right. Interesting tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
This is known as, nice and cool here, it is now.
Yes, I am on mute.
We have one panelist or not?
I'm on powered off.
Let me just text Byron while I'm at it. We were for a bit. Just pulling up the agenda, pulling up the packet. Myself.
Oh, thank you for the email.
All right, I think we're ready to rock and roll.
I just don't think one panelist is fired.
If which person?
Yeah, right there.
I don't think anybody is.
Here's a good one for you. Somebody
Oh, it's Byron.
tied this wire to somebody's house. Nobody knows who, why, and when.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. Before we start tonight, please let's remember somebody from our community who passed away recently. Donald Nolan Sr. passed away at his home in Seabrook, New Hampshire, with his family by his side on Saturday evening, June 24, June 8th. He was born in Manchester, 1935, and was raised and educated in Newburyport. He enlisted in the U.S. Army, served our country proudly during the Korean War in the 29th Infantry until his honorable discharge in 1956. Donald was employed as a letter carrier for the United States Postal Service and was also a custodian at the Kelly School in Newburyport, retiring from both positions after 31 years. He was involved with Newburyport politics, and the obituary had Newburyport politics capitalized, so that is an important thing. He served as Ward 3 councillor and Ward 1 councillor from 1972 to 1986. And I'm told by Clerk Jones that he sat right where Councillor Granis is. He was one of the founding members of the Christmas parade in Newburyport that we still enjoy, and also involved in Yankee Homecoming for over 20 years. He was the chairman in 1973, and he also served as a coach for the Pioneer League for many years. Our condolences go to his wife, children, and grandchildren. And if you could please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. And now will please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Find his name in here. You could probably check your drawer and find his name.
call the roll. I believe we will be joined by Councillor Lane shortly remotely.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the City Council meeting on June 24th at 7 p.m. Councillor Harmon.
Here.
Councillor Khan.
Present.
Councillor Lane. So he's not in panelist one?
I don't believe so. I'll keep an eye out.
You'd have to click that tab, right?
Keep scrolling up and down for Councillor Lane.
Okay. Marking him absent. Councillor McCauley.
Here.
Councillor Preston is absent. Councillor Shan.
Present.
Councillor Wright.
Here.
Councillor Z.
Here.
Councillor Donahue.
Present.
Councillor Granis. And Councillor Cameron.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Late file items.
There's one late file item. It is a letter from Leela Wright regarding Plum Island FEMA buyout.
Motion to waive the rules and accept the late file
Second.
and receive and file.
Okay, all those in favor, we can do a voice vote on this. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Okay, so that is disposed of. Thank you. And now to public comment. If there's anyone online, please raise your hands. We'll do public comment in person. Hopefully you all can hear me. We'll do public comment in person first, and then I'll look to people online if you have your hand up. And again, in person and remote, your name, address, you should be a resident of Newburyport ideally, and 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes. You can speak for less than 2 minutes on a matter that is on our agenda. So first, we'll start in person with, I believe it's Holly Cashman.
Good evening. My name is Holly Cashman. I live at 1517 Essex Street in Newburyport. And I'm speaking out tonight to urge you to vote to support the buyout, the FEMA buyout of the properties on Reservation Terrace and 75th. Through my friends Maureen Adams and Lee McLaughlin, I've seen the struggle of homeowners who are on the front lines of climate change. I've seen how they've had to spend so much money in storm damage prevention measures and to repair damage from storms due to decisions made by others and circumstances that are beyond their control. This is not a second home or a vacation home for them. This is their one modest home, and they are two senior citizens who will have nowhere to go if, or more accurately when, the next storm destroys their home and makes it unlivable. Storms are more frequent and more destructive. We have witnessed this pattern, and the science tells us that this is not going to change, or rather, not going to change for the better. As a city, we have a responsibility to our fellow citizens who find themselves totally vulnerable on the front lines of climate change, waiting in limbo in harm's way. Please vote to support the buyout to help relocate people to safer areas and return this land to its natural state. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Holly. Susan Cooper. So again, state your name, address, and up to 2 minutes.
My name is Susan Cooper. I live at 9 Kent Street, Unit E in Newburyport. And I too am here to support Maureen and Lee. I'm going to speak quickly from the psychological part of this. I'm a therapist, and don't worry, I'm not going to diagnose you. And I'm a critical incident responder, and I have witnessed the psychological fallout of the trauma and grief and post-traumatic stress that Maureen and Lee have experienced through all of this, and have offered them support and guidance, and I am 100% in support for the buyout. I hope that it gets voted. It seems to be the fair and right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Art Currier.
Good evening. My name's Art Currier. I sleep at 12 Partridge Lane, which is across the river. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Waste Stream Task Force of Newburyport that I've been a member of, as well as the Alliance of Climate and Environmental Stewards. And the issue is about the need to reduce waste. And I would say Molly and the team have done a great job to attempt to control costs. But the reality that we're facing is that in 2050, we have to reduce waste by 90%. Reduce the amount of waste that's being produced in this city by 90%. So that's a little over 2% per year. Now, when you think of the last 2 years, we happen to have increased the amount of waste we have to dispose of. I'm here to just say we've got to get with reality. We've got to look long-term and step up to the plate, because how are we going to manage what's coming after us fairly soon in the grand scheme of things if we don't plan for it? So I would recommend that the planning that's being done in the community start to take a position of long-term and come backward. And thank you, Molly, for what you've done, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lee McLaughlin.
Hi, my name is Lee McLaughlin. I live at 975th Street, Plum Island. I'm losing my voice, and thank you for this opportunity to speak, although public speaking terrifies me. And if I actually lose my voice, someone will have to take over. Now I'm taking up my 2 minutes. My wife and I reside at 975th Street on Plum Island. This is our primary and only residence. My grandfather built the summer cottage in 1950. It's been in my family for 74 years. I've lived here full-time for over 30 years. Life was good until the reconstruction of the northern jetty 8 years ago, which was the impetus for the erosion on the north side. Then came years of flooding, devastating loss, numerous failed temporary solutions, financial loss, emotional pain, and suffering. 2 years ago, FEMA offered a Plum Island mitigation buyout to homeowners designated RF, repetitive loss property owners. In order to qualify, you had to submit proof of flooding and damage done to your home. We accepted the buyout in good faith. After waiting patiently, FEMA and the City of Newburyport are currently carrying out final steps. In early May, Mayor Reardon signed an acceptance of programmatic requirements issued by FEMA. And last week, GZA informed me that FEMA approved the funding 2 weeks ago, and they are just getting the contract in place. As the project moved forward, I was reassured by GZA, MEMA, and the city officials that the city has committed to this and will honor their commitment. I attended a site meeting with FEMA, MEMA, GZA, and the City of Newburyport, where everyone was on board and fully committed. This buyout will not go forward without the city's support of fund matching of only 10%, which is substantially lower than usual. We spent thousands upon thousands of dollars in self-help projects, repairs to damages we've incurred, evacuations to pet-friendly hotels, not to mention the emotional and physical distress, as my therapist attest to that. This is not sustainable for us. The real possibility of losing...
Thank you, Lee. Can you conclude in
okay.
30 seconds? You've been quite a bit over, too, so. And I know this is tough for you, so
and realize
keep
this
going.
is a difficult vote. Sadly, buyouts are a reality for FEMA as a mitigation solution to climate change. This is the city's opportunity to be proactive to the community instead of reactive to individual crises that will only worsen. This will set precedents for future resolutions to cities and communities afflicted by climate change. Please honor the city's commitment and support the buyout. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Lee. Stephen, I am familiar with Polish names being Polish, but your handwriting is not
It's
good.
Ukrainian. So
I'm sorry.
it's Ukrainian. I'm Stephen Coalition, and I stand in support of the 10% funding for the Plum Island FEMA buyout. I've been a homeowner at 3 Couriers Court and a property taxpayer to the City of Newburyport for 49 years. I know it is our human nature to kick the can down the road, but that's nothing to be proud of. Sooner than later, we will all be paying to move entire cities further from the ocean's edge. We really should get started on that now.
Thank you, Stephen. Ron Barrett?
I'm Ron Barrett, president of Plum Island Taxpayers, and I'm the one that started the MRBA, which started the wheels for this to get going. We fought with FEMA and fought with all these people who lift houses, pay for houses. But my only problem is where you're taking the money from. We have money that we have $20 million worth of 38,000 bolts in the ground. These bolts here that have to be replaced. We can't take the money from there. We have to make a way to fix this problem, not take the money away from the problem. And we should have free cash for this. This should be run on free cash, not money that we got because the engineers didn't do their job. Anyone want to see the bolts? Nobody wants to see the bolts?
Chief fell for it last time.
Yeah. You want to see how bad they are? There's 38,000 in the ground, and they only got $5 million. That's a $20 million project. So we should be able to buy out these people from free cash, and we should keep the money because we're all going to still be living there and they're going to have the problem, and everybody in the city is going to have to pay for it if you give this money away, which we paid for ourselves, all the $22 million. There's no questions?
Thank you, Ron.
Okay.
You'll hear us talking about it pretty soon. Thank you. Next would be Rick Tainter.
Hi, Rick Tainter, 10 Dexter Street. I have several things I'm going to talk about very quickly. First, as chairman of the planning board, I want to offer my enthusiastic support for the reappointment of Bob Kaup as a member of the planning board. He's a very talented and experienced architect and knows a lot about the development process, so he's very helpful to the discussions in the planning board. The second thing is I want to support the proposed zoning amendment for the property on Low Street to allow a community center within a certain distance of a public school. I think that's the logical next step in this process. The third item I want to talk about is to support the plan for expanding the smart growth district along Parker Street to address our responsibilities under the MBTA multifamily housing law that we have to address by the end of this year. And the final thing is I want to express my opposition to a proposal that has come in and is on your agenda tonight to raise speed limits on several of the streets in the city. The city's been doing a great job of making the streets safer. Just looking at High Street, we have the Safe Routes to School project, we have the traffic calming project at Marches Hill, we have the new, very innovative, I think, crosswalk at Olives, and I understand there's another traffic calming project along High Street, sort of between Olives and Three Roads, and I don't think it's the right thing to be doing to raise speed limits at this time. We should be looking at protecting pedestrians and bicyclists, and I don't think there's a logical reason to raise speeds along High Street, Merrimack, and Hale Street in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have Maureen Adams.
Hi, my name's Maureen Adams. I reside at 975th Street, Newburyport, Mass. Because of the changes made to the jetty in 2015, we've lost about 500 feet of sand and pristine dune, which when combined with the ever-rising tides has put us and our home in danger. This is our only and one home and our primary home. It has been a long, hard journey that we've been living through for the past 8 years, and many of you have been there since the day the erosion first started, and we did all we could to stop it. Since then, other of you have been elected throughout the years, and many of you have come to the floodwaters as they rose around our home. You walked around the grounds and saw firsthand the destruction and devastation. You offered your comfort, strength, guidance, and most of all, hope. Hope that we would work together and find a solution. I believe FEMA is a proposal that's right, and the time is now. Conservation and restoration of previously occupied land could help create a climate-resilient landscape that can serve as a natural buffer against flooding to protect Plum Island and Newburyport. The buyout project would be an investment in the future of Plum Island and Newburyport, which would be more affordable when compared to the long-term cost of rebuilding, municipal expenses associated with emergency response, damage to infrastructure, city flooding insurance, and future climate impacts, not to mention keeping the first responders and residents safe from the impacts of storms and floods. Other not-so-measurable costs are the economic impact of coastal tourism and our town being portrayed as unsafe due to flooding week after week in the news and on social media. Our town could be an example going forward when other federal and state funds are available for towns throughout the country. The city of Newburyport could stand in the forefront, showing that they have proactively participated and followed through with their commitment, not only to the government, but to their constituents. This could be a platform for future government funding and policies for Plum Island. The buyout is an option that the city has been a part of and approved. We have waited 2 long years for this buyout to happen. Commitments were made by the federal and state and city governments and property owners in good faith. Please honor your commitment and support in this final step. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Walt Thompson?
Walt Thompson, 100 State Street. I speak in favor of not raising the speed limit in any sector of Newburyport. Secondly, I speak in favor of those of us who increase our trash because we have no control over what Amazon boxes are used or what Market Basket packages its things, so my trash will increase. We have never asked the city of Newburyport to pay any percentage of the cost to dig, purchase, and install a new sump pump at our home. Our due diligence before we bought our home told us that rising groundwater was something we could expect. Likewise, we have never asked the city of Newburyport to mitigate the increased air and sound pollution at our home. Our due diligence before we bought our home told us that increased air and sound pollution from the city's parking lot next door and traffic on State Street was something we could expect. We have never asked for public funds to be used in a private property funding program. Are we missing out on the city giveaway? To me, that sounds allegedly unethical, like asking the mayor for money to vote for him. The federal government prints money. FEMA is part of the federal government. The city of Newburyport does not print money. Please vote no to give private interests $300,000 plus so they can reap millions in return for FEMA buying their properties. The ethics of this action are questionable.
Okay, thank you. Leela Wright?
Hi, Leela Wright, 55 Reservation Terrace. I'm here also in support of the FEMA buyout. I am writing this letter to express my support for the FEMA buyout of the neighborhood properties, in particular the property owned by Lee McLaughlin and Maureen Adams at 975th Street. They have struggled for 4 long years with the emotional impacts of the reoccurring flooding that has taken place along Reservation Terrace, 73rd and 75th Streets. It was 2 years ago when several neighborhood homeowners who had filed multiple recent flood insurance claims, myself included, were offered the opportunity to participate in a buyout program. In the end, only 3 property owners expressed an interest in proceeding with the process to sell their homes: 15 73rd Street, 975th Street, and 12 75th Street. For Maureen and Lee, this opportunity has given them a sense of relief and a belief that there would soon be an end to their distress. The proposed purchase of their home at 975th Street made sense to them, and they were eager to see it through, understanding the family home would be torn down and the land would become open space for the community to enjoy. This brought some solace, albeit a sad reality that their family home would no longer be. I've witnessed firsthand the fear and anxiety these storms caused Maureen and Lee, at times choosing to pack up and leave to avoid the panic and dread associated with the uncertainty of whether their water would be shut off or their cars or their basement would be flooded. As neighbors, we check in on each other during these storms, as we often feel we are alone out there. We exchange photos and words of support. When the winds calm and the water recedes, we venture out to help clear the debris and collect yard furniture, screens, or whatever else has floated away. We check in to make sure our neighbors are okay and that they have what they need. It is during these times that I've recognized the ongoing fear and anxiety they suffer as a result. These storms not only cause damage to our homes and our personal belongings, it affects our health and well-being and our sense of security. The insurance proceeds never cover the expense of the damage or the repairs. More often than not, it's a heartbreaking, daunting, and expensive situation to recover from. I've watched the waves tear away propane tanks, fences, steps, gardens, and even the front wall of my neighbor's home, and then watched in disbelief as the concrete blocks from the wall and the home's contents were being tossed up against our homes. The 1573rd Street house has been uninhabitable for 3 years now. It has been disconnected from city utilities and power and now sits boarded up on a disheveled lot surrounded by dead trees, broken fences, and debris. It's an unfortunate outcome and a blight in our neighborhood and a constant reminder of some very dark days.
Okay, if you could conclude momentarily, that'd be great.
We often hear from many people that believe the islanders should be retreating. Well, that's what these folks are trying to do. The city agreed to pay their 10% of the cost involved in purchasing and demolishing these homes. In September of 2022, when there were 6 of us involved, I had asked where this 10% funding would come from and was told it would come from free cash. We elected not to move forward because we believed there were others in greater need of this solution. The process has a rigorous oversight from FEMA, and the simple fact that they have been approved and the purchase establishes the relevance of the situation. Please approve the local 10% required portion of the funding for the purchase of 975th Street as part of the FEMA buyout program. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie Sontag, and again, a friendly reminder for 2 minutes. Thank you.
Bonnie Sontag, 21 Smith Street. I'm here to speak in favor of keeping the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, specifically on High Street. For 20 years, I lived on Upland Road, which is a small street that comes out just above Olives, and there would be times that it took almost 30 seconds to get out onto High Street when the traffic was flowing, and it could have been longer. I didn't actually time it, but at some point, I would just gun it and get out there. And we all know that that's what people do when they've been waiting a long time. Since the speed limit has been reduced and many people, I'd like to say most people, are adhering to it, it's been much easier to get out of the side streets. Now I do a lot on Olive Street, and that's another example of a small side street. And I recommend that anybody who is considering changing the speed limit on High Street spend some time coming out of those small side streets and trying to get out when the traffic is moving at a reasonable speed, because it's sometimes easy and sometimes, but you can see the difference. Today I was driving in Westwood, came off of Route 95 and went west immediately on Route 109, which is a local street, and I wasn't sure what this traffic speed was, but there was a sign there, white lettering on blue background, big, I guess it was, four-sided sign that said, "Please show courtesy to side street traffic." I thought that was excellent because it got me thinking about where's the traffic? Is there a lot of traffic behind me? Should I be slowing down to let these people in? The second thing I want to say is about the comment in the letter to the City Council recommending increasing the speed, and the letter writer spoke to the fact that he doesn't see very many bicyclists on High Street. There's a reason for that. Bicyclists that I know don't feel safe out there, and they're experienced bicyclists. I think this is a chicken and egg kind of thing, where if we have slower traffic, people who are driving can see pedestrians and cyclists more easily and make way for them, or because they're going slowly, they can actually get out of the way. So I think if we keep the speed limit, and I'm saying specifically on High Street, to 25, it will continue to make all of the side streets and the pedestrians and the bicyclists on High Street feel a lot more safe in that part of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And another friendly reminder, we will be getting to online comments shortly, so I know we have at least one hand raised, so if people online want to raise their hands, that would be great. And I'll give that another minute or two. Next would be Judy Timon.
Good evening, Judy Timon, 39 Lime Street, and I want to speak to urge you not to consider
raising the speed limit on any streets in the city. I know as councillors, you're very, very concerned about the safety of all residents. I've seen your concern as resident after resident has come before you either in this meeting or at TSAC meetings to talk to you about their concern for the high speed of traffic within the city. And also to remind you that, yes, I am one of those cyclists. I was on High Street today. There were, and I counted about 10 cyclists in the space of about 10 minutes. If a pedestrian or a cyclist is hit by a car going 25 miles an hour, your chances of dying of a fatality is 40%. That doubles up to 80% if the speed is increased to 30. So if you get hit as a pedestrian or cyclist at 30 miles per hour, you have an 80% chance of having a fatality. And the other item that I wanted to urge you to appoint Bob Kaup as to reappoint him as a member of the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next would be Vernon Ellis.
I'm Vernon Ellis. I live on 5 Fruit Street, and I'm here to speak to the issues of Lee McLaughlin and Maureen Adams. They've been living with the situation that they've been living with at the South Jetty was rebuilt in 2014 and 15, and to express support for their FEMA mitigation buyout. I was their neighbor, and I was also the unofficial neighborhood liaison from 2015 to 2019, organizing the neighborhood, working with the Army Corps, DCR, various state politicians and agencies, as well as the city, the mayor, our city councilor, DPS, and conservation. The issue that we're dealing with on Reservation Terrace is man-made by the Army Corps of Engineers and exacerbated by the current climate issues. The dunes in front of our houses before the jetty was rebuilt were over 400 feet to the water, over a football field in length. The dunes were growing. After the jetty was rebuilt, which shut off the flow of sand and changed the current and wave patterns inside the mouth of the river, we lost 300 feet of dunes in 2 years. There were 3 nourishment projects between 2016 and 2018 performed by the residents, the city, and DCR. All the projects were bare minimum needs, and basically each eroded after 1 season. March of 2018 was the first serious washover in the neighborhood. After that, it just kept getting worse. There were more bare minimum projects, efforts to protect the city's infrastructure and the homes, including cement blocks, super sacks, core bags, boulders, and ultimately the sand from the recent river dredge. All of these are large band-aids for the problem, but not solving the problem the way the jetty was rebuilt is causing. It was and probably is still very difficult working with all the various government agencies and their individual agendas. They were all saying they didn't have funds to cover it and that this other agency will take care of it. The agency that started this is the Army Corps, and they're just getting around to admitting they created the issue, and unfortunately it could take another 10 years to fix it, and there will be significantly more damage until the situation is rectified. Unlike others in the neighborhood, Lee and Maureen's house is their primary residence and the house that has been in Lee's family all her life. They have been through a lot, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight to this dire situation. Their house is in a low-lying area, and I hate to say this, it will most likely be the next one to go. I hope the council will see to it to help them through these trying times.
Thank you. Next would be Eric Tracy.
Hi, I'm Eric. I live at 2 Chatney Lane. I'm here to also speak about the speed limit proposal. I also enjoy biking around Newburyport. I biked here today on High Street. It's not my favorite. You're pretty close to cars. I think we all know that not every car already travels 25 miles an hour, right? Plenty of cars are driving 30 or above. If we were to raise the speed limit probably would just keep pushing those cars a little bit faster, a little less comfortable for cyclists, less comfortable and extremely dangerous for people crossing the street. Right in front of the high school, we've got the new blinking crosswalks. I saw 2 high school students pushing that. Car coming. The hood dips, meaning you can tell that it's braking. The hood dips long enough for the kids to feel comfortable to step out off the curb, and then the car just kept going, right? So I've witnessed this with my own eyes. I don't know how fast that vehicle was traveling to decide, hey, it's not even worth slamming on the brakes for these kids, all right? We want to take this seriously. I know you all have heard of Vision Zero, 0 deaths and 0 serious injuries by motor vehicles on our streets, and I tried to find communities across the country that are raising their speed limits now. You can't find them, right? Most of the cities are actually pushing their citywide street speed limits to 20 and their arterial streets and roadways to 25, not going backwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. We've got a few more, and again, please, 2 minutes. Also, if we could note for the record, Mr. Clerk, that Byron Lane joined us remotely, I'd say about 10 minutes ago or so. So he'll get full credit for tonight. Next would be Sheila Tainter.
I will be very brief, but I want to speak on 2 issues. I was so excited to see that your packet contains a proposal for solid waste reduction, and I hope that you will pass it. We need to reduce our solid waste. This is a very modest proposal, and I think the city can easily adapt. We're encouraged to increase composting, which will make a huge difference in reducing solid waste. So please give that your due consideration. And I also want to speak against raising our traffic limit, the speed limit on the 3 streets that have been mentioned. I certainly would not feel comfortable with cars going any faster than they are now. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn Laser.
Good evening, Carolyn Laser, 17 Beacon Avenue. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My neighbors and friends, Judy and Bonnie, Eric, Sheila, and Rick have already made excellent points about why not raise the speed limit. As a person who cycles, walks, runs, and drives in Newburyport, I really appreciate what the city has done to make the streets safer all around the city. The crosswalks, the different traffic diversion techniques, really, really helpful. I think lowering the speed limit has been amazing. It is much, much safer, and I want us to continue in that direction, opposing raising the speed limit citywide. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Carolyn. Juliet Walker.
Good evening, Juliet Walker, 13 Eagle Street. I'm also a member of the Newburyport School Committee, and my comments tonight reflect that experience as well as my personal experience. So I'm speaking against the proposal to raise speed limits on all the streets listed in your packet tonight. I'm speaking both from a professional and personal experience. I'm someone who walks and bikes and drives on the streets of Newburyport and all the streets included in the proposal. I'm also a professional transportation planner, and I work with communities to design and implement safe streets. And the fact is, as many people have already said tonight, slowing traffic speeds saves lives, or to put it another way, speed kills. And even modest increases in speed have ramifications. Judy cited some statistics. You can look those up yourself on the USDOT Safe Speeds website. This is a policy that has been promoted both within our national government, our state government, as well as internationally, that 20 miles per hour is the standard, and anything over that should be carefully considered before increasing. So I would say that the petition tonight is prioritizing convenience over safety. I would ask you to consider whether decreasing travel time by 1 or 2 minutes potentially, per trip, is worth the trade-off for safety, particularly for our most vulnerable users, namely children, those with mobility challenges, and seniors. And I know I'm not alone in being concerned about safety. Many of you have also heard from other community members. As a school committee member and as a parent of students in Newburyport Public Schools, I've heard from families who are concerned about letting their kids walk and bike to school. They have noted concerns about vehicle speeds, lack of safe routes, and lack of safe crossings. So while I agree we have made great progress in some ways, there's a lot of work to be done. Changing speed limits or maintaining speed limits is one avenue to improving safety, but the result will be, we also have to work on other measures, and I think the result will be a community where more people walk and bike and are safe when they do, and that's the future that I hope to see in Newburyport. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe last, for in-person, Molly Ettenborough.
Good evening, Councillor. So I'm here again about trash. Thanks for the trash contract a couple weeks ago. Just want to say that Ordinance 173 is in front of you tonight. We've worked really hard for years to try and get clear policies in place that will affect all taxpayers, as well as some trash reduction goals. What we've proposed is really minimal, and I'm hoping that you all will support that tonight. Thank you, Councillors McCauley and Khan and Mayor Reardon, for your support. And I'm here. I'll be downstairs again if you have any questions or need any additional information. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll turn to online comment, and I'm going to allow David Ouellette. You had your hand up first, and then we'll have Tina Wasserman, and finally Andrea Wheatman. So David, and then Beth Trock, and that will be it. I see those four, and I think that will be it. So David, I'm going to allow you to talk, and you've got 2 minutes, and so again, name, address. Should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, my name is Dave Ouellette. I live at 7 Woodland Street, Newburyport. By profession, I'm a civil engineer. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Massachusetts. As many of you are aware, civil engineers are the types of engineers that you hire when you want to engineer a roadway. And I have my past experience on roadways. And, I want to speak a little bit about the logic of making some sensible changes to our speed limits. Roadways such as High Street, Merrimack Street, these streets were built for the purpose of reducing travel time. That is the reason they were built, to facilitate travel. And today, those streets are relied upon by thousands of motorists daily to get to critical locations like 95, 495, supermarkets, pharmacies, and budding towns. And when the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit ordinance was implemented in 2017, it left many sections, many residents in the north end, the south end, and other parts of the community without enough means to get to areas like the highways and shopping centers. Those streets still, you're able to travel 40% faster than I'm able to travel when I need to get to the supermarket. And, there are other people in my shoes as well. I appreciate that safety does increase, and fatalities decrease, and serious injuries decrease as motor vehicle speeds decrease. But that's true all the way down to 0 miles per hour. We need to strike a reasonable balance among safety and efficient transportation for our community. Back in 2017, when this ordinance was being considered, just mere days before the ordinance was voted on by the City Council, our primary news source indicated that important arterial streets like Merrimack Street and High Street would not be subject to speed limit reduction. Yet, just days after that, the City Council implemented a sweeping speed limit change that affected all streets. And left many of us without efficient ways to get to destinations that we frequently need to travel. There are ways that we can increase safety on our streets while still promoting efficient travel bump outs that you look at Emerald by Paul's Coffee Shop. Another great intervention that increases safety while still doesn't impede motor traffic. It slows traffic briefly at a critical location and allows the cars to resume traveling at a reasonable speed. And that DOT has even indicated that when drivers believe they can safely travel at higher speeds, they want to do so. And unsafe driving behaviors like tailgating and aggressive driving is the result. And whenever I see
Hey, David, if you could conclude, that would be great.
all right, and as far as compliance goes, whenever I see a speed monitor, a radar speed monitor installed on any of these streets, I see minimal compliance with the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. I don't know what my fellow residents are seeing, but I'm seeing minimal compliance. And it demonstrates that drivers believe that they can travel at higher speeds safely, and they want to do so because they need to get places.
Okay. David, thank you. Next, we'll move to Tina Wasserman. And Tina, I will allow you to talk in the words of Zoom, and you can unmute yourself for, again, 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Tina Wasserman. I live at 28 Russia Street. I didn't prepare anything formal, but I would just like to support the FEMA buyout program and support the purpose, the governmental purpose of Mayor McLaughlin and Maureen Adams' home on Plum Island at Reservation Terrace. I've known them for many years. I've visited them there. I've seen the beach change through no fault of their own. The construction of the jetty and climate change has contributed to their to an inhospitable environment. I also would like to underscore what Maureen said about the city. If this does go through and you vote for the buyout, we will become an example for many coastal cities who will be facing this problem. And I would also like to say that I'm from Chicago, and in the 1980s, Lake Michigan rose, and many houses along the lake shore, particularly in Indiana, fell into the lake. And this, the community was bought out and became a national lake shore park that is really coveted and beloved by many residents. So I imagine the same thing could happen on Plum Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Next, we'll turn to Andrea Wheatman, and I will allow you to talk.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. I'm just speaking to raise two separate items. The first is speaking in support of the zoning amendment at Hale and Low Street. And I'm looking forward and hoping that the council will vote yes to move forward with this process. I think this is not unusually for this area, especially with the school and the church and the jail in the direct vicinity. But more important, like to speak, I'm not in favor of raising the speed limit anywhere in the city of Newburyport. I live at 183 High Street, as I kind of forgot to mention at the beginning of my comments. I've lived here for 3 years. We are a couple of doors south of the funeral home. Prior to living here, I lived at the intersection of Marlborough and High Street. So I have, for the 10 years I've lived in Newburyport, been a visual witness every day to the speeds that people travel at on High Street. And I can tell you that very regularly when walking across the intersection at Boardman, I have people slam on their brakes if they see me. I don't know how we as a city, when we are looking to increase pedestrian traffic, people biking, while roads are meant for cars, roads are also meant for pedestrians to cross and for cyclists to travel on as well. And this just seems, for the, quote-unquote efficiency of somebody driving 25 miles an hour, or 30 miles an hour versus 20 or 25, I just don't see that it's worth taking the risk as a city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next, we will turn to Beth Trock. And I will allow you to talk, Beth.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. There's so much to talk about. I'm going to keep this super short. So 3 things. One, I really encourage you to move forward with the zoning on Low Street. It is a perfectly sensible place for a community center, and that makes sense to get this process moving. Second, as a very, very frequent pedestrian, someone who walks everywhere unless it is raining or snowing, I am not in favor of raising any speed limits anywhere in the city. Drivers who aspire to greater efficiency could leave earlier, and I think that would solve their problem in a far more efficient and fair way than on the backs of cyclists and pedestrians who, don't have the luxury of speeding across the street when someone is barreling down on them, and it has happened to me, and it's terrifying. So please, I would encourage you to receive and file that tonight rather than sending it to committee to discuss. I think the feedback you've gotten warrants that. And finally, I am not a resident of Plum Island, but I do support marriage retreat. We need to have all of our chips in as a community as a whole to do what we can for climate change, and I think that characterizing the buyout as simply throwing private money or public money at a private issue is short-sighted. This is something that provides conservation land. It makes a more absorbent coastline for all of us. It protects other houses on the island from debris during storms, and this is an issue that's not going away. I do support this, and I hope that we can provide relief. Certainly the residents of Plum Island have spoken far more eloquently than I can, but as a mainlander and a taxpayer, I think this is a great use of our funds, and I hope that you move that forward. That is all I have. I hope I was under 2 minutes.
I lost track of the time because you said you were going to be short, so I turned it off. But you were pretty close. Pretty close. Now you're over, so I'm going to cut you off. All right, thank you, Beth, and thank you, everyone, for all of that public comment. Really helps inform us and the decisions that we make. So we would now turn to the consent agenda. I'm sorry. Oh yes, we would turn to Mayor's comment. And if sorry.
No, buying 59 Low Street. We sat here for 2.5 hours one night.
We'll let a couple people move out of here first.
50 minutes of public comment, and then I almost just glossed over. But
Not because I ran out of room.
Well, good to see everyone. I'm going to try to give you back a couple of minutes tonight, so I'm going to be really brief. First, I just want to thank everyone who came to the Market Landing and Bulkhead ribbon cutting last week. It was just an amazing ceremony, huge turnout, and it's been so gratifying and satisfying to see how much use that park is already getting. So I just wanted to say that real quick. Thank you for being there. FY25 budget. Tomorrow night's the big night. I'll say it again. I want to, this is a long process for the council, and it's an equally long process for the city and for the department heads. As again, we started putting the budget together many months ago, and then it all comes down to tomorrow night. And I've said this a lot, so I apologize. I repeat myself, but I do think this is a really thoughtful budget in a really tough year. I don't think there's a lot of really big asks in there. So I'm hoping that we have some good conversations tomorrow night, and we can all agree on a budget that helps move us forward. Brown School Senior Affordable Housing RFP is out, so if you haven't checked it out yet, we did email it out to all of you today, but it is on the city website for everyone listening and watching at home. So if you want to go to the finance page, and it's under open bids on the finance page on the city website, you can check out that RFP. And basically where we landed with the RFP is, we listened to all past history and especially this past ad hoc and all the different factions in town, senior affordable housing, do you keep the gym, not keep the gym, what's the impact on the neighborhood, parking. We kind of tried to fall in a place where we think we're going to hopefully get some really nice proposals that finds a middle ground in a lot of there. So I hope you check that out. Please reach out with any questions, and we're having those conversations now of like what does that review process look like, and how do we involve the city council in that. I know at the end of the day, it's going to be the city council that decides what happens at the Brown School, so hopefully we get some good proposals. West End Fire Station is still moving on, not a lot to update there. We're still looking at a September finish. They're currently installing a lot of the systems in there right now. Tonight you have those zoning change for 59 Low Street, and I will just say I hope we can all support this. I think the one thing that we've heard throughout this process, this really long process of working through this building project, is concerns about costs. Well, this helps us get to a more accurate cost at the end of the day. So I hope you can support this, support the zoning change. Let us get to the end. Again, we're still advocating for private funds. We've got a lot together right now. I'm really happy with where we are with that. I know there's more we can do, but I think we're going to land at an overall bond request that everyone should be happy with. And just something great to talk about tonight. This just came out. It was a press release on Friday, but the American Association for State and Local History has announced that Newburyport Black History Initiative is the recipient of the 2024 Leadership in History of Excellence Award. So that's a really nice kudos to Newburyport, kudos to that group who came together, Dr. Baumgartner, Jordy Vining, and Sid Rasky for all their hard work. Again, that project is still ongoing, but it was nice for them to get some recognition. So again, more to come on that, but we're really happy for them. And again, that award will be I think given out in September, so we'll be looking forward to that. That's it for me. If you have any questions, I will just say on the FEMA buyback, I know these are difficult conversations. When this first came out, the way it was presented to the city is that the ratio between FEMA and what the city would have to put in for this, it's never been this good, right? And so we felt it was the responsible thing to do to open this up and see what kind of response we got from the residents out on Plum Island. And here we are. So I look forward to hearing how you speak about it tonight and where you land on it. But we thought it was a good use, and I don't look at it. Oh, where's my buddy? He left. I don't look at it as, I look at it as we're purchasing open space. I don't look at it as a misuse of funds. I think this is something, it's what a responsible community does. So again, I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions, comments for the mayor?
You all have a great meeting. Thank you.
We will. Thank you. Now we can turn to the consent agenda.
Thank you. So it consists of the approval of minutes for June 10th. There are 4 communications. 558, which is a request by the library for the use of State Street for a horse and carriage on August 30th to go to license and permits. Communication 559 is the solid waste changes, June 2024, Public Works and Safety. 560, related changes to solid waste services, a memo from the administration, Public Works and Safety. 561 is a request to amend speed limits, Public Works and Safety. Application 216, Block Party, Quail Run, August 24th, license and permits. Application 217, Coastal Chic, which is a request for an A-frame on the sidewalk outside of the condominium, license and permits. Application 218, Newburyport Brewing, A-frame at the corner of Water Street and the Oldies lot, license and permits. There were 2 transfers, 197, Plum Island Hydrant Replacement Program, $175,000 to Plum Island Utility Trust Fund, same amount, budget and finance. Transfer 198, Shoreline Resiliency Rail Trail Project, $45,000 to Market Landing Public Park, Art, $45,000, Public Safety. Appointment 497, Gary Gorski, 18 Magnolia Street, to the Board of Registrars until 7/1/2027, General Government Committee. Appointment 498, Jeff Cutter, 10 Colby Farm Lane, Newburyport Licensing Board until 2030, license and permits. Reappointments, Michael Dissett, 44 Jefferson Street, to CPA, 7/1/2027, Planning and Development. Appointment 500, Joe Texera, 44 Hale Street, to the Concom until 7/1/2027, P&D again. Appointment 501, Keith Hogan, 3 Bartlett Drive, Newburyport, to the Trust Fund Commission until 7/1/2027, Budget and Finance Committee. Following items are coming out of the respective committees. Budget and Finance, transfer 194, orders 575, 580, 581, transfers 195, 196. License and permits, applications 204, 209, 211, 212, and 213, all coming out. Planning and Development, ordinance 172, appointments 490, 492, communications 549, 530, and 540. Public Works and Safety, appointment 491, orders 572, 449, ordinance 173, and that is the consent agenda this evening.
Can we pull appointment 501, please?
Can we pull communication 559?
Motion to approve as amended. And collectively to receive and file the mayor's update.
Okay, great, thanks for that. So let's just be clear. So communication 559 would be removed, and Councillor Zede, what was the first one you said?
Appointment 501.
501. Okay. And that was made by Councillor Zede, seconded, I believe, by Councillor Donahue. All right, we'll do a roll call on this.
Okay, on approving consent agenda as amended, including the mayor's update, Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Z?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron? Thank you, 10-1.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to...
I think that would be 501.
Motion to approve on first reading.
Second.
Okay, Councillor Zede, thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up here.
Just a brief thing as to why. I just wanted to say that sending appointments to committee has been the subject of debate over the years. It was not customary to send every appointment to every board to a committee. There are a list of boards that were deemed sort of to be extremely important. In this case, this is a reappointment. The resume is in the agenda. There will be a sort of cooling period, if you will, between a first and a second reading. Budget and Finance has been tremendously busy, and I think that it's acceptable to work from what's in the packet. And if councilors have questions, they're welcome to facilitate through me to the applicant or to the administration if they wish. That's my rationale. Thank you.
Okay, so that's on appointment 501. That was made and seconded. So this would be an approval of the first reading.
First reading. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that motion. That makes perfect sense. I believe that was seconded by Councillor Harmon. Okay, any further discussion on that?
Point of order?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Which appointment is it? I know it's just 501, but
The appointment 501, and this is to the Trust Fund Commission, and as Councillor Zede said, that is one that's not listed as having to go to committee.
Got it.
It's Keith Hogan, 3
It's
Bartlett
Keith
Drive.
Hogan, it's a
Sorry.
reappointment.
Should have read that out.
Thank you.
So, roll call.
Roll call on approving Keith Hogan, first reading. Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you. I think that leads us to communication 559 that was pulled out, which is solid waste changes.
Motion to receive and file.
Thank you. Councillor McCauley?
The reason I'm doing that, the request was made to the department head to give us an overview and a communication plan. This is the overview of what the ordinance will talk about. It was pasted in the packet in summary form. Everyone's had a chance to read it. The summary's there. There's no sense to talk about it anymore. That's why. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Any further comment? Roll call?
Roll call on receiving and filing communication 559. Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Z?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you very much. The second on that was?
Which leads us to orders.
Orders. The first order is a 583, which is a gift from the City Improvement Society in the amount of $3,600.
Motion to attach an emergency preamble and approve it tonight.
Second.
Okay, Councillor Zede?
On both. So this is a City Improvement Society gift, $3,600. It's to paint several fireboxes, 6 of them. It has been discussed with the fire department, so they've kind of approved the location, the color, all of those different things. The reason it's an emergency, I was informed by the administration on the way in that they wanted to commence work prior to our next council meeting and in advance of the start of Yankee Homecoming. I said I would would make the motion for an emergency preamble. It's a relatively small gift, so I'm asking for your consideration. In terms of, I did not waive the rules. In my free time, I read the rules for the city council, and there is a specific rule that says accepting emergency measures, so I don't see any reason to waive the rules since we are doing this as an emergency preamble of the charter, and I would defer to the clerk to help with some eloquent language to describe that emergency. Thank you.
I think you're sufficiently eloquent yourself.
Sir.
It would be emergency preamble for the purpose of, what's an emergency?
To get the work done prior to the next city, or to commence the work prior to the next city council meeting, insufficient time to...
And I would waive the rules just to be conservative.
Okay, so moved, if you wish.
Okay. And so that was you and seconded by? Thank you. Okay. Roll call, Mr. President?
Roll call.
Okay. Aforesaid motion, Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue. Yes. Councillor Granis.
Yes.
And Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Well done. Thank you.
Order 584.
584 is the intermunicipal agreement between West Newbury and Newburyport with respect to evaluating, designing, and repairing the Plummer Spring Road and Middle Street Bridge.
Motion sent to Public Works and Safety. Second.
And committee of the whole?
And Committee of the Whole.
Okay, that's accepted by the sponsor, and the second on that, Councilor Granis, that's acceptable to you?
Yes.
Yes. Can I just speak to this as the sponsor of the order? This is old terrain for some of you, newer terrain for others, including myself. But I've been a part of 2 meetings with the administration and folks from West Newbury, including one meeting with Senator Tarr that was actually very helpful with Mass DOT. This is going to get a lot of due diligence, so I appreciate the work that the committee and the Council of the Whole is going to need to do on this. That bridge was in decline in 2017. I know it's probably one of those things that we hoped never would have to be addressed, but one way, shape, or form, we've got to decide what our role will be in terms of finalizing an intermunicipal agreement, which we need to do whether we commit any money or not, and whether we will contribute funds to fix the bridge. And, we'll hash it out in committee. I think there'll be a lot of ideas out there. I'm sure there were when many of you were dealing with this in 2021. And there's a fair amount of urgency, but I think over the next month and a half, through a couple of committee meetings, we should be able to understand the facts and make a good decision on this. So that's what this is about. And so the motion on the table is to Public Works and Services and Committee of the Whole.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comment? All those in favor, roll call.
Roll call, Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, committee items, Councillor Zede.
Okay. We're going to start off with Transfer 194. Consistent with other large transfers, we'll take this project by project. So the first is going to be, and I'm going to go right down in order as best I can.
Councillor, would you consider doing number 4 first? Because I have to recuse myself, and then...
Okay, I think that would be fine.
Sure. So that'll be a motion to approve the Plum Island FEMA buyouts. Second. Thank you. Go ahead.
If we need her, Julia Godfredson, I'm going to make you a panelist if you need to weigh in. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So first, let me just introduce this. This is $395,000 in change. It is split down the middle in terms of the request, $197 from free cash and $197 from the Plum Island Hydrant Replacement Fund. You've certainly heard a considerable amount from public comment, but let me fill in a little bit more details for you. First, I'll just describe the program briefly. Then I'll give you a little bit about the committee discussions, and finally the committee results. So the Plum Island FEMA buyout is a federally run program by FEMA and then administered more locally by MEMA, the Massachusetts equivalent. It is a program that's enabled to basically purchase out homes that, as was described in public comment, have had repeated losses. So it is not a program for any home, say for example on Plum Island, but only those that meet specific criteria. Typically, this runs as an 80-20 program where FEMA covers 80% of the cost and 20% is covered as the so-called local share. For whatever reason, in the year when this endeavor started, FEMA was offering 90-10, so in this case it's 90% and 10%. It is not just the cost of the purchase of the homes, but as you can imagine, there are administrative costs. There are also costs associated with things like title searches, research. There is a consultant that has been on board with the city throughout this process. That's GZA Associates that you've heard about. Those who work on city issues hear about GZA all the time, so it's certainly not a new name. There are 3 homes that are being considered. I'll talk more about that as we go forward. And this amount, the $395, represents that 10% of the share of the purchase, in addition to the share of the administrative costs that are calculated by FEMA. And it is FEMA at the end of the day that does the due diligence on the specific properties that are going to be purchased. They are also the source of a considerable amount of paper relative to things like there's for example, if the homes are purchased, they are removed, the homes are removed, it becomes open space and a conservation restriction is placed. The language for that conservation restriction, for example, comes at least in boilerplate form from FEMA, so they are in a lot of ways the source and certainly the lead, and it makes sense as they're paying 90% of the cost. So we did a little bit of that introduction in committee. We then had a bit of a conversation around it. This is the first time that the city has undertaken this type of effort. It hasn't really been tried before. It was initially requested, this funding was originally requested through CPC under the free open space, some months ago. The CPC did not recommend it, and that's why it never came forward to the City Council, so there may have been some confusion about that, but the Council hasn't ever really taken this up, even in committee, because in that case, the CPC did not make the recommendation. So we did talk about that in committee. As you heard, there, basically foreshadowing from public comment, there is a little bit of debate around this. There are philosophical questions about whether buyouts are appropriate, whether they make sense in this location, whether this amount is correct. I will say that in committee, we certainly did spend a fair amount of time in addition to talking about that on the actual source of funds. And utilization of the hydrant fund is typically somewhat of a controversial thing on top of a controversial question of buyouts. So that was brought up here. And then we did talk a little bit about some of the sewer needs on the island as it relates to that source of funding. So that is, as best as I can, encapsulates the committee conversation. In the end, we did take a vote. It was 2-1 to recommend approval from committee. I certainly have more to say as the ward councillor, but I will pause there, as I often do, as the chair delivering the committee report on this. As the president mentioned, I know a lot about this just from having lived through it for several years with the residents, but you do have Julia, who is the official staff contact with FEMA and MEMA, and has been a central person in reviewing the copious amounts of paperwork that they deliver, and continuously following up with them and so forth. So I think between the two of us, hopefully we'd be equipped to answer your questions that you may have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zeid. And Julia Gottfredson, is there anything you'd want to add before we move forward with our discussion and deliberation?
Our conservation agent works in the planning office.
There's something I would add to what Councillor Zeid has already explained.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCauley?
Okay. No, go ahead.
So I've been following this. I wasn't a fan of it years ago, but I have evolved my position on this given what's gone on and the position that FEMA has taken with covering almost 90% or more of this. I think this is an opportunity for the city to get ahead of this going forward. My concern is the source of funds, and particularly the Plum Island Hydrant Replacement Fund. In committee, we started to talk about it, but it was not my committee, and the item had already closed. But I'd like to suggest as the debate goes, and I will make an amendment later on, that we use the $197,513.80 from the stabilization trust fund line item, reducing that to $52,000. I think that that's a better use of that. The funds will go back. If they're not used, they'll go back to the stabilization fund to be able to put in there. But if they are used, then there's no reason for us to go from, our goal is 5%, we're at 5.5, and we want to go to 5.8. I think that's kind of tone deaf in terms of what our residents are telling us. We can't be squirreling away money, and I think this is a good use of it. So, thank you.
Okay, other comment, Councillor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. So I was the dissenting voice in committee, and I definitely, have been talking to some of the residents there, but I do want to, if folks could kind of humor me a little bit, I do want to give some context of what we're dealing with here. Some people go back to 2020, Councillor Shand and I introduced an ordinance. The intent of that ordinance was to talk about development on Plum Island. So one of the things that we're going to talk about and we're going to hear about is that there are homes that today are at risk. And we know about that, and we've been hearing about that. When Councillor Shand and I introduced an ordinance, we got a lot of backlash. In fact, it was very hard, it was rough. People did not understand, did not want to be told what to do with their homes and their properties. So we go forward 4 years or so, 5 years, and we're in a situation where buyout, retreat, all these things we knew were coming. We've invested money to do studies with Newbury on looking at Plum Island, the barrier island, what protects residents. So philosophically, where we are today is that there is more, or I would say less control on development on Plum Island than other parts of the city. And that's been heard from CONCOM, Planning Board, variances, development there is happening. And one of the things that was trying to be done and accomplished is to look at homes that are generational homes, that are modest, have been designed for the island, have been beach retreats, beach homes. And then you got the gamut to 2 million, 3 million homes built on pillars. And so what we're finding out is the homes that were kind of natural to the habitat, that have been there generationally, are suffering. And that's what we're hearing about. That's what the public comment was about. And I have gone to some of these homes. So there's 3 homes being considered, just so you know, and I don't know if people got a chance to Google it. I will say the other thing that's hard here is we don't have all the information in our packets. You have to go to the CPC meeting in February, where there you have a link to all the documents, you see the maps, you see the appraisals, you get a better sense. In committee, we were told there were 10 homes given the option to buy out, but only 3 accepted. Later, I heard there were 6 homes or 4 homes. So there's no transparency or equity on how homes are being selected. There's no criteria on if it's a generational home. There's no criteria at all on is it someone that could really afford to kind of, help put in the 10% that's being offered by FEMA. There's really no transparency on how home selection is happening. So if you look at the maps and see where the homes are, and this is where I will tell you where my story is shifting. So this was my approach in looking at this. And at some point, I would like to hear from the person, from our CONCOM administrator, because this application was done on December 6, 2022. And the part that resonated to me the most when I reached out to the residents to talk, it's one of the ones I've always been very, very much trying to be as much support as I can for them, because I did see the emotional trauma, pain that they were enduring. But there was a city commitment, a city promise. That means something to me. Now, we've talked here in this body, the people here have said, wow, nothing's vetted with us. How is this happening? Who's making these promises? We are the ones ultimately that have to make the decision on money. But sorry, there was a city promise. And yes, we all did not know about that. But the application was submitted in December of 2022. And in that application, the 3 homes are there. So there's nothing, I don't even know how that reach out was done for all the people to sign up. Well, I don't know if it was an email, a door-to-door, a mailer, who knows how it was done. But we have the 3 homes. But let me tell you about the 3rd home, which actually they bought in 2018 for close to $1.1 million. And they were the ones talked about at committee they might end up putting on the market. Because yes, you go to see, yeah, if the FEMA buyout, they do the appraisal, it's also in that CPC document, 83 pages, take a look at it, but you'll see what the appraisal is. And now that homeowner's like, well, will I get more if I sell it? Which is a real issue. Should they sell it, or should they go for the buyout? So that one might come off the table. We don't know. So all I'm saying to everyone here, that there is a precedence we're setting. This is new to this community. And for me, sitting on the energy and environment policy with the state, where we've now formed a coastal communities municipal group, this is the opportunity to make lasting change for the residents of Plum Island. We could say this is a one and done, but it's not a one and done. There is a lot that we need to look at our ordinances and really think about protecting everybody there and be ready for that conversation, not brush it under the carpet as we talk about. So what I am going to be in favor of is, after I looked at the homes, looked at all the 83 pages, understand that this is done, it was promised, it was committed. I have nothing to do with that portion. I would have liked to have been notified or talked about, but I wasn't. I will support, but the source of money is where I'm going to really scrutinize this, and I don't think free cash is it. I will wait. I look forward to the conversation, but I want to make sure I shared my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Zede.
Thank you. So now I want to just take off the chair hat and just speak as the ward councillor. So I just have a few points I want to make. First thing is, really do need to, I think it's fair to want to rewind the tape a little bit and just sort of understand how we got here. This process, I know that the application was filed in 2022, but I can tell you that it's been going on for longer than that. This idea was conceived and first contemplated at the lowest point in the last 5 to 8 years on the island. That's when the waters were basically at the shores of what was then the shore of Reservation Terrace. And so it just actually is a testament to how dynamic things are out there. Obviously, in intervening time, things have yet again changed, both naturally and maybe unnaturally is the wrong word, but by the hands of people, and that would be namely in the form of the dredge of the river and the placement of the sand. But these homes in particular, first of all, you don't have to take my word for it. They meet FEMA standard for repeated losses. One has very obviously had losses. The other ones may not outwardly look so, but there are just areas where, unfortunately, water, by its nature, where it goes, it collects and so forth, causes a tremendous amount of damage. And so that's how the genesis of this. The second thing is to speak to the advertisement, the timeline, and so forth. It's when people say, how are things going on the island, I sort of say, how much time do you have? Because you can literally go, it can take 100 hours to explain, but this buyout program was pretty well known on the island. Again, it wasn't made for everybody, and not everybody would have qualified even if they raised their hand and said they were interested. And so it was advertised. We talked about it in MRBA, the Merrimack River Beach Alliance. There were emails that went out. There was an effort to offer it to anybody who was so inclined, but honestly, it's hard to know exactly what the program's going to look like, or even what 10% would have been, or what the interest of the city would have been to fund up to X dollars. So it was put out there with a little bit of unknowingness of what the response would be. This is what came back. As the councilor mentioned, even out of the 3 homes, yes, there is still some degree of uncertainty with some of them. That's a true statement in my experience and my understanding as well. But that's basically the genesis of this. So yes, it was advertised. People had the choice. It is a very difficult decision. I think you heard in one of the emails we received, this isn't something you hope for or you want, because it does mean you're in a very rough position. So that's kind of how that was done. The qualification, again, was done by FEMA. So there are 3. That's a fixed number. GZA, who's the consultant, is the one that helps manage these numbers and give you the numbers that you have. This 395 is not a random number. This is based on a substantive amount of data that goes in with the assessments and so forth. The third thing I want to say is just that, the jetty's been mentioned several times, but one thing that has changed on the island is, for years, I think the cause and effect of the jetty was considered conjecture or lore. Residents think it's the jetty. Do we know it is? But in the intervening time, the Army Corps is undertaking a Section 111 study, which basically means that there's an acknowledgement that the jetty's causing problems and that they need to find a solution. Unfortunately, the timeline on that is effectively unknown, so it could be some time before they even conclude the study, let alone make any thing. So then the last couple things are just what happens to the space if this does go through, and What happens if it does not? If it does go through, then, as was stated, the structures are taken down, a conservation restriction is placed, the city of Newburyport becomes the owner of the land, the fee interest in the land, so they hold the land, hold the conservation restriction, or could give the conservation restriction interest to, we've done this with other organizations that you see around the North Shore on Essex County, to hold the interest in it to ensure that it basically stays open. It would be traversable by the public and open to the public for use. Generally considered for passive recreation. We're not planning to build another waterfront park there, but you could basically just enjoy it as you could with the beach. So people are very, it's a tough position. If I'm being honest here in terms of flexibility, I do want to see this pass. I do want to see at least one of the three homes, the one that's most certain, pass. And I'm more than happy and willing to make a compromise to do that. And I actually think some of the councilors' points that were just made, the allergy, are very fair. I'm a longtime person who's, these are always subject to appropriation, and we always lament the fact that we're last in the thing, and that is something that I hope does change. But alas, it's not changing fast enough, so that is an understandable and respectable frustration. So in terms of last thing is just to address the source of funds. I do think it'd be a tough thing to get rid of free cash entirely. I do think there's some sensible understanding that the Plum Island Hydrant Fund was not intended to just be the go-to anything for Plum Island Fund. And so free cash gets used for anything, any legal purpose. In fact, the rest of this transfer has dozens of other purposes that are for the benefit of a specific neighborhood or whatever the case might be, and that's okay. That's sort of what we do. It's the line between what's a gain and what's just the public benefit. So I would suggest a couple of things. One is I'd be happy to make a motion to amend this down to $143,535, which is the amount for the one home. And I would ask with this following breakdown, $100,000 from the Plum Island hydrants and $43,000, the balance basically. The 143, again, is not a random number. That is the number that associates with that one property that has most seriously committed to this program, and as you heard in public comment, is clearly ready to move forward. I don't know what's going to happen to the other two. We might have to cross that bridge, so I want to be very transparent in saying I don't know if it'll come back at, say, when free cash certifies or in another transfer, but for now we have certainty in this one, and so that's where the 143,535 that was calculated by GZA today. And then in terms of the breakdown, there's not a scientific method to saying what percentage goes from each, but I'm asking for roughly 2/3 and 1/3, and I hope that that's some good faith show that we are dipping into the Plum Island, which, by the way, I'm going to get yelled at for every part of this position by many, so please take this with a grain of salt that it is offered in good faith and in the spirit of compromise. So that is a formal motion to amend. It is within our right to reduce the amount. All of them are within the amounts of the transfer, so I don't require assent of the administration. Thank you.
Sorry, Councilor, can you repeat that, please? I just
So
want to
the motion to amend is to reduce the overall to $143,535 and to change the funding sources to $100,000 even from the Plum Island hydrant, so-called 5005, that's the account number, and then $43,535 from free cash, which is the balance there.
So that's an amendment to your original motion, and need a second on this?
Yes, please, and thank you.
Move to a second.
Second, Macaulay, Councilor Macaulay. Okay.
Sorry, I just want to get that right. 143,535 for free cash?
143,535 total, and then 100 from free cash, pardon me, sorry. I'm just starting too, it's too early to be making mistakes like this. All right, so 143,535 grand total, $100,000 from Plum Island hydrant replacement 4005, and then the balance 43,535 from free cash. Thank you.
So that motion to amend has been made and seconded. So discussion on the motion to amend. Councilor Granis.
Thank you. Just a quick question. So this is for Mrs. Adams, Mrs. McLaughlin's house, is that correct?
Yes, this is the amount that aligns with 975th Street. Again, just so that it's on the recording several times. I don't know what's going to happen with the other two. If and when they just FEMA finalizes, and if and when they decide to move forward, the administration may come forward with another transfer. But just again, trying to compromise. Thank you.
Councilor Khan.
Just want to ask a clarification. There is one home that is condemned there. So are they not part of the list or the buyout, or they were, my understanding is they don't occupy it? It's, I think it's the property that was mentioned as a blight. So I just want to understand, are we going to do a few, or are we addressing home by home? So I just want to make sure I'm clear, because it's written 197 from one, 197 from the other. So what are we doing here, I guess?
Councillor Zede?
I'm just amending the whole thing to that 143,535. That is sufficient to cover the one home. Those two it's a tripartite agreement. You have FEMA having to agree, you have the homeowner having to agree, and you have the city having to agree. So those two are going to be in a pending state, is how I would call it. And that's largely because they haven't sort of given a final commitment that they'd like to participate. So I think it's a very tough situation. I think with three, I don't want to see nothing get done tonight, frankly. And so I'm trying to thread a needle, if that helps.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Khan?
May I ask Ms. Gottfredson then, the Concom administrator?
And Julia, you're going to be asked a question. If you could speak loudly, that would be helpful. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Khan.
So my understanding then is the only firm commitment we've gotten from the homeowner in agreeing to the buyout program is the address, the one that's at a total of 143,535, and not the other two. Is that correct?
Well, so, I mean, I guess I can't give you a firm answer on that specific question. I do want to quickly go back to one thing that you mentioned before, which was that you did think there was transparency in how the homes were selected in the program. I just want to clarify and say that the homes weren't selected by us for the program. It's a completely voluntary grant program, and so they had to request to the city that they be able to participate in this grant application. And the city is obliged to be the applicant on behalf of the homeowners who want to participate.
And how did they hear about the grant program? So it was a mailer that was sent? Some are summer residents, some are, how did you communicate with them?
Right. So, I mean, the grant program has been around for years. I'm not sure how long. It's the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. And we knew about it because we had spoken with FEMA and people from coastal zone management who knew what was going on Plum Island, who knew the risks that these residents were facing on an annual basis because of storm damage and erosion. And they had told us as a city and told the folks who come to the public meetings that we have as part of the Maryland River Beach Alliance, they had brought it up at those meetings, they had brought up to the city that there is this grant program for residents who were interested in having their homes bought out because they were so in harm's way and so vulnerable to like complete loss of their home. And so it had come up, we had talked about it for several years actually, and considered doing this program the year prior, but chose not to for various reasons, one of which being that we weren't sure what was going to happen with the dredge of the Merrimack River, etc. And then actually Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency approached the city and said, hey, listen, you all, if you have residents on Plum Island who are interested in this grant program for this buyout, this year only, or this is the first year that the cost share will be reduced from 25% to 10%. And also there's a larger amount of money available nationwide in the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program this year. So not only are they more likely to get a grant because there's more money in the program, but the cost share for the city would be dramatically less than it would be any other year. So we thought, okay, this is sort of an onerous grant application, but let's throw that out there again to the residents on Plum Island who are in this most vulnerable location and see who might be interested in participating. It's sort of the city's obligation to open that up because it is a program that's available to residents. So, I believe that an email went out, and this was several years ago now, to the residents in that neighborhood. And again, we didn't sort of select anybody, but the reason why it was directed to that neighborhood is because not anyone on Plum Island can qualify to be part of this application. You have to literally keep out to lose your home. You have to have payment flood insurance and be considered repetitive loss, what they call repetitive loss property, or a property that is in danger of being completely lost due to the rate of erosion or some change in the environment that puts them in a more severely take that lightly. The amount of detail that went into that benefit cost analysis was incredible. I can't even, we had to have a lot of help just to gather the information that they wanted to see. And so that's how we ended here with these 3 homes. Now you asked the question of, is it just Lee and Maureen's property that have given us a firm answer? They have certainly given us their firm answer. We've heard that tonight and before from them that they absolutely want to participate. But I don't want to imply, Kuzinski's and then Mr. Sachs on 73rd Street are not 100% interested. They have been interested all along enough to put their homes in this application. They just haven't given us yet. Now that we're at this point where FEMA's getting ready to give us their answer as to whether or not we can fund us, we haven't heard back from them in terms of like, yes, I will sign on the dotted line if this comes through. Because again, it still is voluntary. One of the questions that they asked before submitting into the application was, what if we change our mind? What if something changes and at the end of the day, we actually don't want to sell to FEMA? They don't have to. And so that's still a situation. Maureen and Lee still want to, and that's what we know right now. I think that's why Councillor Z is offering this sort of compromise at this time. We may still need to go back and get a firm answer if we hear only after we finally hear from FEMA on the other 2 properties. But I hope that answered your question, and sorry for taking so long. I just really wanted to get that background in there on the application.
Thank you. And I do see there's a hand. I don't know if that's the other property owner, but...
That Mayor Reardon has had his hand up. Mayor, did you want to say something? Let's move on. I'll take that as a no. Public comment is closed, and you don't have a name here, but Stans, I'm going to allow you to talk. And again, we're not opening this up to the public that's present, but I don't know who you are, so rather than me just saying no. So Stans, I'm going to allow you to talk. Could identify yourself, first of all, that'd be great.
Yes, hi, I'm Stan Sachs. I own the property at 1573 Street, and I apologize if I got into the meeting a little bit late.
Okay.
But unfortunately, some of the information you're given is untrue in regards to my property. And I just want to give everybody in the committee to understand exactly what's going on, which is different than the other property.
Okay.
They did make an offer on our property, but they made it at 50% of the market value of the time of the incident, not at the full market value like they paid on the other house. The reason for this is because of the damage that happened on us. The reason. We have our opinion, my wife and I, at this point, that if we do not get full market value for the house, we will not go forward. So we want the committee to be aware of that. I did communicate that to the mayor, and I just wanted the committee to know about it. So I apologize for interrupting.
Okay. No. Thank you, Stan. Appreciate that, and thank you for providing that information. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so let me just remove his permission to talk and lower his hand. All right, so motion to amend on the table. Councillor Z, you all set?
Can you go and, I'd like to go into that, but if you're responding to something.
Yeah, all I wanted to respond is just what I'm understanding is that the resident who spoke does have a right to ask FEMA to reconsider the assessment effectively, and I believe that that is allowable under their rules, but that process has to play out, and the timeline on that I couldn't speak to, but that is something that's in process. I know it may take time, may not. It's hard to know, but I just wanted to add that piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shand and Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Councillor President. Just a quick question to the ward councillor, if I may. I appreciate the compromise on where the funds are coming from for that one house. Are we setting a precedent here if the other 2 houses do opt in, and we would be looking at 2/3 from the Plum Island Hydrant Fund and 1/3 from free cash on those? Are you thinking that's a precedent you're going to be setting if we did do the other 2? Just curious.
Okay, that's from Councillor Shand. Councillor Khan.
Sorry, I'll
Or
let
if
the
Councillor Zede wants to
board
respond.
council
I'll just
respond.
answer in two ways. One, obviously legally, no, there's no precedent set on what this or any, whether it is this council or future city council may choose to do in terms of apportionment. As a practical matter, yeah, I mean, listen, we're trying to find the balance point of where the city council is comfortable, and this is a need for my ward. So I think at the end of the day, it is my responsibility, it is my job to represent my ward, and if this is where the balance point is, then that is so be it. And that's with due respect to the challenges around the Plum Island sewer system and the upcoming future challenges that we may have around boats and so forth. But like anything else, it's a conversation, it's a balance, it's threading a needle. So I think legally, no. Practically, I don't think it's an unfair or unreasonable argument to make.
Thank
that
you.
helps.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Khan?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is setting a precedent. It is, and that's no way around it. But I do want to respond to a couple of things. One is, I think for our Concom administrator, what's the time period that we have to, that this grant or this opportunity is open to us until? It looks like maybe the other residents, if there is a desire, we are only addressing one home, and I think that's also in the whole fairness of being equitable. We're opening that door, and I just want to make sure we're mindful if this is only for this kind of period, there's a closing time, that would be helpful in me understanding the time frame of maybe hearing from the other two homes.
That's a good question, Councillor Khan, thank you. Once we hear from FEMA whether or not the city or the residents have been awarded this grant, I believe there is a time frame by which we have to move forward with the sale of the home. And there's obviously paperwork and legal issues that are involved with getting that done. And so, yes, there would be, we would have to give them a deadline at that point. I believe it would be, I can't say how long I'm sure they would give us a couple of weeks, but it would be like
Councillor Khan again? Yeah.
Sorry. So we hear about that potential deadline, which means then to me, in what we're approving today, I feel like if we are, once we make this approval here, we basically are sending the direction that this is our submittal and what we've have an appetite to take on. And so I just want to make sure, are we going to be holding it for, what would be our response? Because here's where I am to my fellow colleagues, is that the original request were these 3 homes. Who knows what type of last minute considerations, maybe a reconsideration of their market value, which I can understand. But one of the things I struggle with is if we are going to be doing this, again, it's being consistent and being fair. I made a point that if we needed to take more, and here's what I'm wondering, if these homes don't, let's say we raise this, try to get close to the amount of the 3 homes, and let's say the other 2 don't decide to move ahead, that money will come back to the city? How does that get, or is it held somewhere? What happens to that money?
Councillor Zede would like to answer that.
Yeah, and I'm certainly happy to defer to the finance director as well to get a formal staff answer if you prefer. But this is a grant, so the grant gets awarded, then the transactions occur. So the approval of this doesn't mean the money goes to FEMA and then we're asking them to give it back to us. Basically, at the end of the day, there's going to be these contracts that get executed. This is a land transaction. I mean, we've done those on the council, purchasing land and so forth. So at that time, it's just sort of like, trading papers or exchanging papers when you close on a home. And that's when the time when funds would transfer. It actually was called out specifically in the order that any funds that remained unused would basically return in proportion to their original source. So if, let's say, we did approve all 3 and only 2 went forward or 1 went forward, the remainders would go back to the Plum Island Hydrant Fund and the Free Cash Fund in their proportion that they were taken out. So I don't think we're going to be in a position where we're asking for a refund, so to say, or giving us money back, but rather the grant gets awarded. When the transactions occur, they would exchange funds. And I don't know, Ethan, if you want to add anything or change anything.
That's my understanding as well. Once appropriated, the funds would become available. But no, that doesn't mean that they'll be spent The only time they would be is if that agreement is eventually entered into. And should the amount change for whatever reason, or should it decrease, unlikely, any balance would, as the councilor said, close back to the funds that it came from.
Okay, Councillor Z.
I just wanted to add one last thing, which is about the timeline in general. So FEMA is a magical agency where it's always 2 weeks away for the last 5 years of 2 weeks. But what's changed in the last couple months, last month, 6 weeks, is they're starting to give, more finite dates. They're subject to appropriation too, so that they have all these processes that play in, but they're talking, their language and their tone has shifted, that they're really talking seriously about, this being imminent. And I agree with Julia that, they're not going to give us an extended period of time. Once they say, okay, the grant, they're not going to give us a year to think about it, because from their perspective, it's already been 3 to 4 years. And that goes back to some of the earlier frustrations, but it is what it is in that sense. So I do think it is imminent in that sense, and I'm not sure the city will embark on this again, but if it does, Julie and I have had extended conversations about how this might be done differently and how you might approach this from a city perspective. FEMA has a very narrow process because they do this all the time. The city doesn't have that process quite as built out, and infrastructure would need to be created around it to make it more efficient. But based on this conversation and just in general, again, I'm not convinced the city would undertake this again or take an 80-20 split instead of a 90-10. So TBD on that.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so we have a motion to amend on the floor.
We do.
Any further discussion?
Go on.
Councillor Donahue, sorry.
Sorry, just waiting. Thank you. So I actually wanted to revisit the Ward Councillor 5 suggestion of the funding source, and the stabilization fund does kind of seem like a rainy day fund to me, and this does seem like better use of funds in this situation, whether we do the 2 or the 1 or whatever. I just wanted to throw that out there and make it more complicated.
Okay, Councillor Khan.
Yeah, I was just going to say I will support this. So I've heard everything. I had to ask my questions. I do want us to recognize there's 2 other homes that we're not addressing. But I'm hearing and confident, this is the Ward 1 councillor. I do recognize the amount of work and effort it does take. And I think this is a good compromise. I am pleased that the amount from free cash has been reduced. So I will support this. Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion to amend? Councillor Shand?
Not so much a question, but would the director like to answer the Ward 2 councilor's question?
About using the stabilization fund as a source of funding for this? That was from Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure, of course, the stabilization trust fund, the general purpose fund that is available for any legal purpose that the city sees fit. As the city's finance director, I would, always caution against that. I think the city's policy is to maintain a bare minimum of 5% of our annual budget. Currently, we're at 5.4%. The appropriation in this transfer brings that ratio up to 5.8%. Still, just slightly above the city's, that 5% bare minimum target. If it were, substantially higher than that, it might be a different conversation. I think I would note in our recent ratings update with Standard & Poor's, they noted that, the city's reserves are strong. However, they're significantly lower than our similarly rated peers. What that means is that other communities with strong ratings have better reserve positions than the city. I think in percentage terms, they'd rather see it closer to 8 to 10%. So for that reasons, I would just, yes, we can do it, but I would strongly caution against it.
Thank you.
If I can just ask a money question or comment, just so we're clear on what we're voting for. If we used $100,000 from the Plum Island hydrant replacement, that would take it from roughly $372,000 to $272. correct?
Correct. So, yeah, just since I'm up here, the total balance in the Plum Island Utility Trust Fund, which is where the hydrant funding originated from, is just under $1.8 million. If you add to that the Plum Island Hydrant Replacement Fund of $373,000, the total balance in the utility, from the utility settlement is just under $2.14 million. And then after that, it would, be reduced by $100,000.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. Further discussion on the, so this is, we'd have a vote on the motion to amend, and if the clerk could read that again, and then we'll do a roll call.
So this is a motion to amend the original motion to approve, and the amendment is to reduce the amount of money to $143,535, $100,000 of which would come from the hydrant fund, and $43,535 would come from free cash.
Okay, that seemed clear. And just one other point of clarity in case it gets asked. I mean, this is a majority vote for removing that? Okay. Correct. Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Clarification, does anything with the Plum Island, so this is not the stabilization fund? Because I thought that was a supermajority out of that.
It's not the stabilization fund. Councillor Zede?
It's funny you should ask. So, okay, so to explain it as quickly as possible, the settlement went into the stabilization fund. From the stabilization fund, monies were taken for hydrants. Remember that project from a few years ago. Some money was left over from the hydrants, and that's the 372, President, that you were asking about.
Yep.
So this is a child of that, and it used to be 8 to come out, but in the last year or so, Massachusetts general law has changed by the state legislature. It's 8 to create one of these funds or to change its purpose, but it's now 6 to come out. So the supermajority requirement is no more under Mass General Law. And it was a subject of conversation with the finance director. He sent over it was buried in something. I don't even remember which bill it was, but it is 6 now. So
Thank you.
that's how it goes.
Okay, motion to amend. I think we're ready for a roll call.
Okay, on the aforesaid motion to amend, Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
No.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright, recused himself. Councillor Zede.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so now the main motion has been amended, and
Motion
maybe we can do a roll call on that.
to approve as amended would be in order.
That would be good.
I take that back. Motion to approve as now amended is on the floor.
Yes, it is.
Roll call on that, Mr.
Roll call.
President.
Yes, Mr. Clerk, thank you.
Okay, motion to approve as amended. Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Zede.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, here we go.
Councillor Wright. He's asleep. No, he's awake.
Next up, so I'm going to go back to the top of the list now. Motion to approve $250,000 from free cash into the stabilization trust fund. So this was just discussed a little bit, but this is a formal request as part of Transfer 194. It is $250K, as I mentioned. Stabilization fund is a so-called rainy day fund. As Ethan mentioned, we kind of got into this a little early, but essentially our target is to put 5% of the budget into that. And basically, the budget's always going up, so what 5% is can change over time. Current balance is approximately $4.5 million. That is above the target at 5.5%. With this transfer in, it would bring the amount to 5.8%. Again, that target is 5, so we are already above it. We would be further above it. But I think the finance director's primary argument is putting money into it in the years where you can, in the thought that there may be some years where you can't, combined with the concept that because the budget's always going up, 5% is an ever-growing number. So just, I suppose one way to say it would be to try and get ahead of it or build some cushion up for those years where you couldn't. without still having to tap yet into the stabilization fund, which hopefully is a day we don't hope comes. So the committee did deliberate on it. It wasn't a tremendously long deliberation, but it was 3-0 recommendation in committee.
Great. Any further discussion on the transfer of $250,000? Okay. Hearing none, we'll do a roll call.
Roll call on stabilization fund, $250,000. Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCarley.
No.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor White.
Yes.
Councillor Zede.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, motion to approve $300,000 to compensated absences, $290 from free cash and $10K from paid parking.
Second.
This fund was created in 2014 as a way to essentially look ahead towards absences and compensated absences that may be coming forward. And compensated absences largely comes from retirement. So as folks maybe bank time, that time, depending on their contract and so forth, may need to be paid out. And so this, first of all, the amount of $400,000 is based on an approximate number of retirements that are anticipated. There are roughly 5 retirements that are anticipated. The reason for a larger number in comparison to more recent years is a couple of employees who are known to have a good amount of sick time. The reason it's approximate is that employees obviously, while there are rules and guidelines, they can say they're going to retire and that gives a signal, but then may not actually end up following through, or vice versa. You may have little warning and then end up having a retirement that has to be funded. So this is somewhat of a legacy program in the sense that newer contracts that have come through here, for example, with collective bargaining agreements, don't allow the banking of this kind of time or to this degree. So it is a bit of a legacy program, but of course, as the city has a number of employees at any number of years they've been with the city. So it is a relatively large number, and again, that's because of the expected compensated sick time. The reason for the ratio in terms of the sources is simply based on the ratio of the salaries that are anticipated to be paid. So you have $290 from free cash, which obviously is the vast majority of it, and then a little bit from paid parking fund. Again, I think the committee looked on this favorably as a planning way rather than all of a sudden having to do a $400,000 free cash transfer. So it was 3-0 in committee.
Great. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call on compensated absences.
Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCarley.
Yes.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Zede.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, motion to approve $100,000 to the OPEB, other pensions, trust fund. It's a split of $94,240 from free cash, $3,300 from water retained, $2,200 from sewer retained, and $180 from harbor retained.
Second.
All right, so OPEB is the tough one to talk about. This is other post-employment benefits trust fund. So we have the obligations we have towards the actual pensions themselves, but then we have these other liabilities, namely in the form of health insurance and things like that for retirees. We have an approximate liability of $82 million. We're at $1.3 million funded, 1.61%. OPEB has really taken a step into the spotlight in the last 10 years or so, most notably GASB, which is the Government Accounting Standards Boards that tells you how to build your balance sheets, required cities to bring this liability onto their balance sheet, which previously had never been shown. And $82 million is a pretty big number, even for a city of Newburyport balance sheet. So the way that the liability is computed is that there's an actuary that is hired to figure this out every 2 years based on our retiree profiles, if you will, ages and expected life and all the things that actuaries get into. So there are a ton of assumptions that go into it. So this basically bluntly does not make a big dent in the $82 million, but it is looked at as a show of good faith, for example, to retirement agencies and to others that we're at least acknowledging that OPEB exists, and we're trying to do something. Again, $100,000 against $82 million is not argued to be any sort of major sort of things. And lastly, we did ask, two last things. We did ask how are we doing relative to other cities, and I guess it really is all over the map. At 1.61%, we're sort of like, at the towards the bottom, but I mean, some cities don't have quite as big an OPEB, so it's really a mixed bag, and you have to think about how to compare it. And then lastly is the pension is definitely taking precedence right now, so the idea of funding those pensions, which are being required by the state to be fully funded by 2038, is sort of the priority, if you will, coming down from the state to municipalities. And then I think maybe if that is achieved, then one would argue they probably would look to this next and really start to push cities to try and fund this fully so that we can meet our obligations. I should say, I keep saying last thing, I keep forgetting. So right now, it's not that these are being paid, these other post-employment benefits. Like, for example, retirees get health insurance today, and want you to understand that it's coming from the budget. So when you look at the budget tomorrow night, the health insurance line includes retirees. This is that long-term actuarial curve of what's going to actually be owed. So 3-0 in committee for this one as well.
Thank you, Councillor Zede. Any discussion? Okay, roll call on the OPEB Trust Fund, $100,000.
Okay, Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Sheehan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Z?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is a motion to approve city building security upgrades, $246,848. To use round numbers, 100 from free cash, 51 for receipts reserved for appropriation insurance proceeds, 23 harbor, 25 paid parking, 29 senior community center maintenance revolving, and $13,000 senior community center project. Thank you. This is primarily for two things: security cameras and access controls. It's the Verkada platform. The reason I mention that is I think at this point we have a little bit of familiarity with that, with the recent request and approval for the schools. They have about a $750,000 investment that they're in the process of making over the next 10 years to implement this system. We did ask at that time if the city was going to be following suit. It wasn't contemplated at that time, but it did end up becoming, I guess, a higher priority as it flows through here into this request. We had Mike Bartlett talk about really what the system is. Again, it's exterior doors, cameras. In this case, it is not a lease agreement. Theirs was, if you remember, there was a financing component to the schools. This one is an outright purchase. We asked, why one but not the other, and it just seemed like the numbers didn't make as much sense. This is a smaller investment comparatively. This system is also being installed at Station 2. Which was an interesting conversation. And then it's a combination of replacing but also adding some new cameras. The most, I'd say, controversial part of this was we do have an ordinance on the books relative to security cameras that was brought up by the Ward 5 councilor. I imagine he's going to talk about it. But we are supposed to, at least by that, I believe it's an order, actually, not an ordinance, but by that order, I can't remember which one, but by that, we are supposed to approve the deployment of cameras. So I did request a list of all of the cameras. I do have it. There are quite a few, and that's something that we could amend into this, but it's hard, I think, for the council to assess the location of each camera on the fly here, and there are literally dozens of them. But that's anyways, so that's what it was. It was 3-0 in committee at the time. Thank you.
Discussion, Councillor McCauley?
Yeah, so I am concerned with our compliance with our own laws in terms of an ordinance at all. 12.7 says no camera shall be permanently placed without approval of the city. We have 50 of them that are existing that we haven't approved. We have 26 that are being proposed to be installed. 20 of those are actually inside offices. So now we're going from monitoring the outside and security to putting cameras in people's offices. And we have no proposal from the administration. We have no policy for surveillance cameras and how the data is used and manipulated. I can't help but tie this to an article I read 2 days ago in the Globe about how we're all becoming, under surveillance. And because of that, especially in a workplace, people, or a home, or things like that, it's increasing people's stress levels, et cetera, along the way, because there is no place to turn off. There is no place to not be part of a reality show TV potentially goes on there. And so when we talk about those things like that, either if we want to proceed with this, then I would put an amendment on it that said, subject to approval of a comprehensive plan and review of all security cameras from the City Council and approval by the City Council according to 1210, or I just suggest that we remove it from this request, and which would give everyone time to build the appropriate level of policies and belts and suspenders, and then take this up when the free cash opens up again, let's say in November, when we can do that going forward. And so I understand security, but I also am a First Amendment guy, and I think surveillance has gotten a bit out of hand, and 50 existing kind of show that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor McCauley. Councillor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I definitely have to say I can agree with the sentiments expressed by the Ward 5 councillor. I do believe, the plan is important. I definitely agree with that. I think, like City Hall, for example, as we'll see later, there was a request for a feasibility study that to potentially look at City Hall for anything that's like cost savings or upgrades, which we'll get to later. But there does seem to be, there is a lot involved here in the sense of the plan, the locations, our ordinances, just like we do with crosswalks, because we have that ordinance, we could even list out, where their cameras are. I think that transparency is important, and to not know that, I definitely, it is a flag for me. So I would rather go through the route of an amendment to say that we have something in place where that plan is presented, and then later on in our council forum, we could introduce an ordinance to address that ordinance, as well as identify and put a bulleted list about cameras. And I definitely think, and to err on transparency, I think that's a great way to handle it. So.
Okay, Mr. Clerk?
So, did you make a motion to amend?
I did not.
You did not, okay.
I think we're still in the discussion stage, and maybe there's an amendment brewing. Councillor Zede?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask maybe the finance director, how can we meet the bar of encumbered, but have a secondary process relative to the location and the policies? Do you think that if we approved it with an amendment and just said subject to a final approval by the City Council on the location and policies surrounding, that would be sufficient to be considered encumbered for free cash?
Yes, I think there would be an appropriation in place. It would just be subject to the amendment.
Okay, then maybe I'll just do it if it's okay to synthesize. So motion to amend that this is approved, but subject to a final vote on the City Council around locations and policies, and just leave it simply like that, and that can come in, and that way, because I know VRCOT is coming through, and I don't, and free cash might be in November, so I think this could be the way out for all of us.
Second. Okay. So the main motion has been amended.
It has, and I've got it, subject to approval by the City Council around locations and policies. Do you want to say something
Camera
clearer,
locations.
such as subject to
Camera locations?
a plan on locations and policies approved by the City Council?
By order.
By order?
Yeah, we don't need to make another ordinance. We just need to approve it by order, I think would be sufficient.
Okay.
Just so there's no question later.
First and seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call.
On the motion to amend?
I think it's all been combined by the main sponsor.
No, this is the amendment.
Just the amendment? Yeah, I think it's just the amendment, Mr. President.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Roll call.
On that motion to amend, Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue? Councilor Granis?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Okay, so the motion approved is now amended.
Roll call.
Roll
Unless
call
there's
on
further
the-
discussion.
No further discussion? Okay, the motion to approve is amended. Councilor Harmon?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
No.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Z?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue? Councilor Granis? And Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, unless there's any objections, I'll do a motion collectively to approve fire headquarters bathroom renovation, $50,000, with $50,000 entirely coming from the smart growth 40R incentives, 25 fire, which is replace, update, radio shed and equipment and shed, 175, 135 from free cash, 20 from water, and 20 from sewer retained earnings. And finally, portable radios, $50,000, all of which coming from smart growth incentives. Okay, so these are all public safety themed. Thank you for letting me take them together. So the fire headquarters bathroom renovation, this is the famed single bathroom at Station 1 that the chief often talks about. I think, you know, what he kind of indicated when he visited was that they had kind of hoped for a full gut of the bathroom. Actually, they hoped for much more, but in terms of the bathroom, that's what they were hoping. But this is a more modest, essentially like, you know, veneer, if you will, like new vanity and just fixing up the shower. The flooring is asbestos there, and I think there was a considerable amount of conversation around some of the shortfalls around Station 1. But right now, this is one new vanity, a shower, a urinal, tile over the asbestos floor, kind of clean up the ceiling grid, leave the lightings, really largely cosmetic, to try and deliver a sort of cleaner bathroom to the firefighters. So that was that one. That was 3-0. The replace equipment, update equipment and radio shed is actually a quadruple deal, if you will, because there are various, there are 4 departments that really use this equipment in and around the city. So you have fire, police, water, and sewer. So specifically for fire, so first of all, there's a couple of different areas. There's the shed that they're referring to is on Rossend, so that's near the hospital. And there's also a fire transmitter specifically at Marches Hill. And then finally, there's a Story Ave one. All 3 of those serve fire, but the police department really only uses the shed. They did look at it back in 21 and 22. This is basically communications equipment, so the radios and things like that for all 4 of those departments, which maintain radios to communicate with one another, obviously. So it is sensitive equipment. The shed, you know, is not climate controlled right now. It's not even impervious to like critters and things like that. So they've had damage from mice and things like that. So they want to basically get all of those things replaced. And then we've had escalations in cost, and the quotes are about 18 months old. And then they're already working with Station 2 to get that compatible with everything else along the way. We did ask about other sources of money. Notably, could we use the so-called Comcast money that we get as part of a franchise? It wasn't deemed to be on point for this. Some other monies have been used for fiber and things like that. And then we also asked, okay, well, how did you decide these apportionments? You know, why 135 from free cash? Why 20 and 20 from... And so it wasn't as scientific as some other ones, but it was a reasonable guesstimation of the sort of responsibility and usage of the equipment. So all 3 of these were 3-0. And then there was a request to get some quotes. I don't know that those have yet been provided, but that's in the hopper. So 3-0 on all 3 of those.
Did you talk about the portable radios?
Oh, I'm sorry. Goodness, yes, thank you. Okay, so the portable radios are specific for the police department is $50,000. This is an important piece of communication. They're going to basically replace 40 radios that have gone end of life. I forgot to mention too the smart growth 40R incentives. We did have conversation around that source of funds. So when we did the 40R district, there is sort of an incentive, if you will, that's paid by the state, and it's tied to the number of units as they come online. So if memory serves, if all of these pass as they are, it will take that down to 0. But it is expected to replenish to some degree when 3 Boston Way, et cetera. So if and when that and others come online, there would be an incentivized payment. But we are at least proposing, or there is a proposal here to spend the existing funds out of it. Thank you. Sorry, I missed that one.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? So this is the combination of 22 fire, 25 fire, and 32 police.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, hearing no further discussion, roll call.
Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Sheehan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue. Councillor Granis. Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is a motion to approve streets and sidewalks, 185-823, coming entirely from receipts reserved for appropriation settlements.
Second.
This is for streets and sidewalks. The source of funding, as was mentioned in the thing there, is that when we had the High Street line challenges, we did receive a settlement. I think that was early on in this session, perhaps, when it was finalized, and so this money sort of originated from things related to streets, so it was deemed maybe sensible to put it towards streets and sidewalks here. There isn't any specific project this is geared towards, but just towards the general street and sidewalk efforts in 2025, and the finance director indicated it would likely just, by this amount, reduce the amount of borrowing that's done based on the approval we did. I think that number started around 1.8 for the bond for this year, so it'd be reduced by about the same. 3-0 on this one.
Okay, so 36 DPS, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Sheehan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
And Councillor Cameron. Thank you.
All right, next up was a motion to approve the City Hall feasibility study, $50,000.
Yeah, second.
Thank you. So this is as the name implies, a feasibility study around City Hall. There are a number of things that were sort of stated here in the shorthand version, wayfinding, but I think, et cetera, but I think the primary pieces were really around the use of office spaces, the HVAC, and the audio-visual. We did discuss this in committee for a little bit. Special Projects Manager Kim Turner was talking about that. We talked about a little bit about the AV, and then we got into talking about projects and so forth. It was not voted favorably as a recommended item by the committee. It was 0-3, but I'm bringing it to the floor anyways because the committee's recommendation is just that, a recommendation. In the intervening time, a scope was sent. I forwarded it to all of you. That was provided by the administration, I think in the hopes that it would provide some more detail as to what they were endeavoring to study and why. And so that was provided in the intervening time. It's $50,000 from City Hall. For City Hall, entirely coming from free cash. Again, it was 0-3 in committee. I'll just give my piece on it. I did appreciate receiving the scope from the administration. It didn't quite make a difference for me. My bigger thing, as I stated in committee, was just I would like to really try a different process for some of these capital projects, namely around sort of ascribing at least some form of a budget around these projects to give the planning process more weight so that we could understand, and that obviously backs into other questions about the CIP and so forth. So I did appreciate receiving the scope. It did provide a little bit of detail, but to me, I'm still not quite there without having some kind of budgetary figure. And lastly, I think, if the HVAC, which I think we've heard about several times in City Hall, needs to be addressed, then perhaps that is where the focus should be, my opinion. Thank you. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I do agree as one of the ones, actually the whole committee. It's one of those things where this is the avenue to identifying really maybe a commitment level, which I don't think we felt like we were in that space to even have been informed as a consideration. And we do recognize City Hall when we're here, very hot council meetings, that there is obviously HVAC, definitely seeing the scope of proposal. I could see what might be an enhancement, something that would be, I'm sure, very well appreciated, but I do hope that as we talk more about projects and that planning piece, I just want to add my voice. I think that's a great exercise. I think it might even be something, we haven't done a retreat, but there might be some avenues to really talk about where are the priorities going to be, especially now that we know these feasibility studies open up these opportunities that we do something or we don't, but why go through that without really knowing what the vision is across the board, across our municipal kind of investments in buildings? So that's why I also agreed with not moving ahead on this one.
All right, sounds good. Any further discussion, Councilor McCauley?
Yeah, I would agree. You know, we're always stuck a little bit because of a feasibility study will open our eyes a little bit, but on the other hand, we don't want our eyes open that much, right? Because when we talk about City Hall, we're talking about another $10 to $15 million in a minimum project. When we talk about things like HVAC, that's one thing. When we talk about things like code upgrades, that's another thing. When we talk about things like spatial requirements, we don't have enough space in the building to adequately support the number of people who work here. And, you know, there are offices with no windows, there are shotgun offices going through one to another, et cetera, along the way. I was disappointed in some ways that an RFP went out for the Brown School without looking at it potentially as a City Hall annex or something like that. It's a building we own. It needs some placement of additional personnel. You know, we may have a whole floor when we go through something like this that is now subject to OSHA requirements and can no longer fit in the building. And I think that we need to be cognizant of that. And I think that we should talk about it beforehand, before we do a feasibility study. And that's what I meant by opening our eyes a little too wide to some of the challenges we may have. So I will oppose it at this point and hope that we can get it back on track in a tighter scope. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Harmon.
Thank you, President. I won't repeat anything that's already been said, but I will, for the administration and for the council's consideration, just add that in terms of scope and budget, I think we can also look at, you know, what are the, to borrow a phrase, low-hanging fruit items that we could do, because I do think it's important that City Hall is a welcoming space to the community. This is for our citizens, it's their building, and I think in all the ways, you know, that citizens engage with their government, we should be evaluating how we can make that easier and better and more convenient. And I think one of those ways is the layout of the building and the structure of the wayfinding, as it's called, for people to find different offices and spaces. It is confusing, it is not obvious, and so that should be a relatively inexpensive effort. And instead, we get a feasibility study that's talking about HVAC and AV and all of these things and architectures, and so I think it starts to feel like the beginnings of yet another big project, and I think we're going to spend quite an amount of time tomorrow together talking about how much we're spending on projects and as we evaluate the budget. So I would be happy to look at this again. It's $50,000 from free cash. We will have that in the bank if the administration wants to come forward with something that's a little bit more specific and bite-sized in terms of ways that we can improve this for citizens.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so there's, I suppose, a motion to approve.
There is on the floor.
All right, roll call.
Roll call on the motion approved for 36, City Hall feasibility study. Councilor Harmon?
No.
Councilor Khan?
No.
Councilor Lane?
No.
Councilor McCauley?
No.
Councilor Shan?
No.
Councilor Wright?
No.
Councilor Zeid?
No.
Councilor Donahue?
No.
No. Councilor Granis?
No.
And Councilor Cameron?
No.
And the motion fails.
Motion approved downtown lighting, $220,000, $100 from paid parking, $70 from smart growth, and $50,000 from revolving wire inspection fees. So I won't belabor anything on the lights. I think everybody hopefully is fairly familiar with them at this point through the CPC process, where we are actually in the process of replacing all the lights in parks that are downtown, and that's the genesis of this. Is the administration did ask the CPC to fund all of them initially. The CPC said no, we'll only do those in parks, so that left a number of lights that needed to be replaced. This addresses roughly 98. There was a map provided by the administration that shows all the lights that have been replaced and the progress that has been made. So this would be phase 3 of 4, as it's called, and would address quite a few more lights, 98 to be specific. They are the same design, the same vendor, all that kind of stuff. We then did perk up the question that's come around about extending lights up State Street. That is not part of this. It's not even proposed at this point, in large part because adding lights is more intensive because you have to run new wire, and there goes the challenge with that and so forth. So it was a vote of 2-1 in committee, just in the interest of staying standing and not coming up and down. I was the dissenting vote. My issue is not with the project at all. I think all of it should come from the paid parking fund, as that was originally conceived to be the downtown improvement fund. It has morphed over the years, but that smart growth 40R incentives, I think, could be used more broadly across the city, and that was my primary concern, but it was not amended by the administration, which it would need to be to come from another source. So the request you see here is what it is, and it was, again, 2-1 in committee.
Great, thank you. Further discussion on downtown lighting? Councillor Donahue?
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to rise in favor of this. This project is kind of a long time coming. The lighting downtown is fairly abysmal. And I, as the ward councilor, do get a lot of complaints about the dim lighting not reaching the ground in certain areas downtown. But more importantly, and maybe through the president to the chair, is phase 4 going to include extending lights up State Street? Do you know?
Thank you for the question. No, no. That was contemplated to be maybe in phase 5 or beyond, so I wouldn't say it's on the radar based on what we turned up in committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Donahue. Any further discussion? Okay, so motion on the floor is to approve. This is downtown lighting. All those in favor, roll call. Actually, Mayor Reardon raised his hand, and I will figure out how to allow him to talk. Mayor, can you hear us?
Can you guys hear me?
We can now, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We absolutely are considering having lights go on State Street. So it is part of a future plan. I think having discussions like this around funding moving forward, I do agree with the ward councilor that I think paid parking is a great opportunity. I think this is a project long overdue. And our city electrician is working as fast as he can. So we do have a plan in place, and he is replacing all these by himself. But I think at the end of all this, to answer Councilor Donahue's question, we absolutely would love to see these lights go at least up to the Harris Street block on State Street. And I think that would really connect some of that upper State Street up by Newburyport Bank Institution all the way down to Pleasant Street. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, all right, so roll call.
Motion approved, $220,000. Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zeed?
No.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron?
Yes. Okay.
Motion passes.
Motion to approve vehicles and equipment for all DPS divisions, 477, 441 from free cash, and 36 from sewer retained. So this is a number of new trucks for DPS. The largest of the share is the $225,000 for a new trash truck. This almost as exciting as the old West Newbury shared animal control vehicle that we spent, the minivan, those who will recall. So this is a small trash truck, which everybody thinks is very cute, and it is to be used for downtown. So it is for public trash receptacles. This isn't having anything to do with solid waste insofar as private organizations, commercial or otherwise. That sort of got mixed into the conversation as we're doing these trash ordinances and so forth, amendments. Then there's a bucket truck for 180. The bucket is currently shared by Highway and Fire. Highway uses it for street lights to get up high, and Fire uses it to maintain primarily their call boxes. Unfortunately, the truck is actually great, but the bucket has a certifiable life per OSHA and all those things. So the truck will actually continue to stick around, but the bucket will no longer be able to be certified, so it can't be used, hence the need for a new one. The Transit is a $36,000, smaller vehicle for sewer, and the Ventrac mower is for parks. It is not a slope mower, even though we originally thought it was. It is not, but it's a large mower for a high-volume mowing for parks. I will say the other thing that kind of came out of this conversation is there was a question about vehicle inventory, which was very good. It sounded like it hadn't been done for a while, but fortunately there is a vehicle inventory now. It is in your CIP, page 99. And so one of the things the director mentioned was that was one of his first things, was to undertake a vehicle inventory. And this $500,000, to use a round number, is an approximate figure that should be expected to recur almost every year in order to keep the fleet moving, so something to think about. We reviewed that in the CIP as well. It was 3-0 on this one.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
This is approving $477,043 DPS. Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley. Yes. Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Zede.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis. And Councillor Cameron. Thank you.
Okay, next up is motion, so sewers, SW07, which was the wastewater treatment facility relocation, was the subject of a considerable amount of conversation in committee. We did not take a vote on it, we held it. I did follow up with the administration, and I, based on what I've heard, consider this withdrawn. There were a number of questions around intent and why do the study, why now, why, particularly around why weren't perhaps some grants that they could have been. There was a strong feeling that there were some grants that could have been appropriate for this. So those were all transmitted, if you will, both during the meeting and after to the powers that be in the department. We didn't hear back. So I think based on my communication with the chief of staff, this one's on a hold from the administration and maybe revisited in the fall, perhaps when there can be some responses on some of those. So
Can I, if I do, Andrew Levine has his hand up, he's on it. Andrew, you're on as a panelist, so you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yep, just to confirm with the administration, just happy to say that we will plan to resubmit this. We'll have a more full scope and some quotes, and we'll be able to bring just a more full proposal for in the future. So we can confirm a withdrawal this time.
Thank you.
okay, so that brings us to motion to approve wastewater treatment facility replacement, priority replacement equipment 355K.
Second.
This was discussed with the committee with the chief operator at the plant, Chris Pratt, and he was very good to sort of explain to us some of the key pieces, which are generator switch gears, an effluent diffuser, a new pump, and the magnesium oxide MgOH pump. So these were basically just rare items at the plant that need to be replaced. All of the funding is coming from the sewer retained earnings, and was 3-0 in committee.
Okay. Further discussion on that? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Council President. I'd just like to say what I said in committee. Our water and sewer rates that we approved are based, or will approve, are based on an effort, concerted effort to raise retained earnings for everything so that we can plan to fund future projects. And I find it ironic that that we're already taking retained earnings away from the water and sewer departments.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call on this is SW08.
SWOA, $355,000 approving the same. Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
No.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion to approve Newburyport High School telephone system replacement, $125,082,000 smart growth and $43,000 free cash.
Second.
We were joined by James McSweeney from the schools, who is the quote new Steve Bergholm, so he was present to describe to us the system. So I guess at the outset, it's a very antiquated system. They showed us some pictures of it. It's sort of, I don't know, looks like what they sent the space shuttle to the moon with in the 1950s. But primarily what's driving this is compliance with laws that have changed. Most notably, one new law, and I apologize, I can't remember the names of the laws, but there's one that 911 has to be dialable directly from any phone without any other digits being appended at the beginning. I guess it started with an emergency in a hotel, and you're supposed to dial 9 to get out, and failing to do so mean the call never went through, so they passed a law saying that it has to be, so out of compliance with those. The voicemail system, I guess, is running on a very antiquated system as well. So that is the primary genesis for replacing this. There was a lot of discussion about, does a school need phones anymore in the age of obviously everybody having cell phones and so forth. The schools, and represented by the gentleman there, said yes, they do feel that that is needed, and that they can, they do need to have a system along this. This is not the same system as City Hall. Yes, each sort of room has its own phone numbers and so forth. And then, there were, again, considerable conversations around, okay, what was the process for selecting this vendor and why this vendor and why this cost and so forth. I think largely the superintendent pointed to Mike Morse, who is the equivalent of our IT director, but in the schools position. He was not present in the committee, but that was what they kind of talked about. Then the last piece was, did the school committee vet this as an important capital improvement, not maybe the system directly, but just as a broad idea of spending on the phones? The answer was yes. It was, a theme there around replacing this. And then we talked about, are these things being looked at consistent with, say, the Verkada system? Do they work together somehow? I can't say we got definitive answers on all of those things, but in the end, the committee saw fit to recommend it 3-0.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion on the NHS telephone system replacement? Hearing none, roll call.
Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
No.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
No.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, two more. Motion to approve Bresnahan MDF-AC upgrade. 50,000, thank you. 50,000, MDF is main distribution frame. This is basically a server room. And I guess in the past it had school equipment. Now there's some degree of city equipment. And the room is running warmer than perhaps is ideal for the longevity and health of the systems. Honestly, we were a little light on details, like what city stuff is running in there, when was it added, who added it, why is it added. And there were some pictures shown which were helpful to show the heat in the room, some infrared imagery that was shown and so forth. And then we did have a conversation around grants that could be available, to improve indoor climate for this kind of room and so forth like that. I don't know that they didn't seem to have searched for those, but did sort of say they'd be open to looking them in the future. It was 2-1 in committee. Again, I was the one, so I'm perplexed by this request after we just spent, I don't know, $600,000 last year on the data center, if you recall that, from ARPA and so forth. So I just think this is kind of, $50,000 to basically cool a room by 5 or 6 degrees doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and should be taken in the broader context with that. So that's why I opposed in committee, and while I opposed today, I leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Khan.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. Yeah, I was the one that brought up data centers for efficiency upgrade, applying for grants. And I think I did make a request or say that to kind of coordinate with Molly Edinburgh and see if the city can enter anything like that, because this is a perfect project for that type of application, and then seeing if you can install equipment that you could get discounted. So I don't know if anything has happened with that. So if there's, I really do hope that's the direction we go. I don't know. I hope with administration, I see Chief of Staff Levine has
Chief of Staff
their
has
hand up.
his hand up. I just noticed that myself. And if you want to, Andrew, if you want to speak.
Also, very quickly, I thought that was an excellent recommendation from the large councillor, and actually, it was quick results right after that meeting. Molly Edinburgh and James Sweeney were able to talk and connect on a number of things, but they included that. So there's no immediate update on that, but we're going to look into it and try to see if there's anything that would fit that project. Obviously, if we are able to find something good there, then we'll make sure that if any funds or the council does vote to allocate funds to this, we return them if grant money can be used instead.
Thank you. Councillor Khan?
Yeah, and so, I will be supporting this mainly because of the technology that's there and being at risk, this is a good example where we've already invested in equipment, and if that equipment does get damaged, that is in our, it's just an additional cost. So I will be supporting this, but I really do think that this is all part of kind of the planning that goes into these types of, when a CIP, because these are all things that are in our CIP, part of that conversation around planning, what's in our CIP, what year we do that all. I really do hope we look at it with that lens of looking at all the sources for grant opportunities. I'm sure maybe that was done, but that is a piece of the CIP process I think is important.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So motion on the floor is to approve with that additional information. So we do a roll call.
Roll call approving SC 05. Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCarley.
Yes.
Councillor Preston, I'm sorry, Councillor Sheehan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Zede.
No.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Okay, last one is a motion to approve the pickup truck body for the schools.
Second.
So this is a replacement vehicle for the schools, as mentioned in the list there, it's 67,390. It's a new F-250 4x4, which would be replacing a 2010 Econoline van. The new vehicle is off the state contract, so that's the source of the dollar amount for that. Basically the 2010 is argued to be at the end of its life, rusted out, impossible to drive, emissions, issue passing inspections. It is maintained by DPS, and they concurred with that. We talked about, if you have a van, why are you replacing it with a truck? And I guess they feel that this provides more options in terms of how to use it. This vehicle is set up to potentially in the future plow, but is not immediately going to be employed as a plow vehicle. It doesn't come with a plow. I think it just has the setup on the front to put it on. In the future, then we got into into how many vehicles do the schools have, and there were two groundspeople and 2 general maintenance and 3 vehicles. So the argument with the superintendent was 2 people share 1 vehicle, and so that's why they would at least like to replace this one. I don't think it changes that ratio. Again, it was 2 to 1. I just didn't really see that this was a super strong need. We got so many things going on. So I was the dissenting vote, and that's the last of the bunch in 194. All right, 2 to 1.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the pickup truck with utility body? Seeing none, roll call.
Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
No.
Councillor McCarley.
No.
Councillor Sheehan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
No.
Councillor Zede.
No.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis.
Yes.
Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Meeting 6, motion passes.
Okay, so that's it for transfer 194. We bid you adieu. Here we go. Motion to approve order 575. Revolving fund spending limits. So again, without rehashing the recent conversation, we have the funds set by ordinance. Annually, we set the limits. We recently did a singular revolving fund retro change for the remainder of FY24. This is setting the limits for FY25. So going into next year, the bulk of them are not changing, but there are some that are. Council on Aging is going up by 5,000. Rec Service is going up by 100,000 to 650. Parks Maintenance going up 5,000 to 20, and Solid Waste going from up 5 to 105. We did have 2 discussions about this in committee. There was at one point a suggestion to lower the Rec Services one from 650 to 450 in an effort to bring the conversation back to the council, but we didn't end up taking up really that amendment. So it's what you see is what is proposed. So again, this would be the limits for 650. Honestly, I think that this has been talked about quite a bit, but the limit is the up to that they can spend without any further action. And there has been some interest in exploring, particularly for Rec Services, given its size, potential other structures. The finance director has provided some information around that. We just haven't honestly had the time to really think about it, I think, at least as a committee. So this is the proposal. It was 2 to 1 in committee. I was the dissenting vote around the size of the Rec Services one.
Okay. Thank you. Any discussion? Councilor McCauley?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment to move recreation services to 450.
Second.
The reason, and thank you. The reason I'd like to do that is, in discussions with the director, what we determined was that 450 would probably take her to February or March, which is the end of the year for them. They're on a non-calendar year, they're on a non-fiscal year. Their year starts in March, and that would actually allow us to get better information as opposed to the prorated type of information we get in June when we look at this. So that's why it's not a penalty. It's just a reminder that we should probably talk about this in February. We've said that 3 years in a row, and we keep getting to June, and then have to remind each other that, you know, their revenue comes in March and April when they start their programs. Their fees have to go out in June to sign up the programs, and they always have this bump or hiccup that happens at the end of June. That's how we've gotten to the 600 and 625. So that's why I'm suggesting it. It'll force everyone, all of us together, to have a conversation before the end of their fiscal year. Thank you.
Okay, so that is a motion to amend that was made and seconded. I think Councilor Wright was the second on that. All right, so discussion on the amendment. Councilor Harmon.
Can I just ask the finance director, can you confirm what was just described in terms of the calendar, and I guess, is there anything preventing us from having a conversation at the appropriate point in time in terms of the budget cycle for this department? And are there other departments for which we limit their spending ability in order to force a conversation around budget and I don't know, accounting of what they have spent at a certain point in the year?
I guess not quite like this, no. I think in terms of the timing in which the department would reach the 450 proposed limit, it's really hard to say. I think, personally, I think we would be looking to submit a request sooner rather than later to bring the fund up to where we know it needs to be. Because I mean, we've discussed the accounting treatments a lot over the years. I think we've yet to find one that makes everyone happy, but we're more than willing to keep talking about it.
Follow up.
Yes, Councilor Harmon.
So I would not support an arbitrary funding limit for this department based on the exhaustive conversation we had during the discussion of this order. Previously, and the follow-up from the director, we got, I thought, a very exhaustive accounting of what had been spent, and some interesting proposals on how she could update appropriately budget and finance and or community services committees progressively throughout the year so that there are multiple opportunities, not just a sort of inflection point in terms of their budget cycle. So I think my understanding coming into tonight was that we had sort of resolved this, that the point at 650 would be allowable as it was the right number for this department for the annual year.
Okay, so any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Councilor Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I would agree with my colleague on Budget and Finance, the councilor from Ward 4. The other thing I want to say is I do appreciate the information that was provided by the Finance Director, and it made me look at some other rec centers in the area, and they seem to be also having revolving funds similar to this structure because of the type of programming that is done. And I do think in good faith with the director of the rec services that they have committed to providing that kind of checking it, letting us know how it's being spent, how their programming is designed in terms of the spending limit from what they're getting and what they're spending it on for the instructors. And so I thought that was a really good direction to move forward. So I too will oppose this amendment because I think it's just, if anything, is going to be creating more of an administrative, I don't want to say administrative burden, but it brings us into a role of revisiting, but not accomplishing, I think, what some of the areas of deficiencies were that were highlighted. I think to truly get to the place where I think everyone would be comfortable is to really see it brought into the budget in another way. And I think that kind of alternative methods needs to be still talked about and still explored. And possibly, you know, we could look at the administration or the finance director to explore that mechanism as opposed to the revolving fund distribution or methodologies that are used. So yes, I will not be supporting this because of the reasons I said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment on the floor? Councillor Wright?
Yes, thank you, Council President. I seconded the motion for discussion purposes. I am going to be in favor of the amendment, and the reason I am is because in my time on the council, we've had no reporting on this revolving fund as is required by state law. We're supposed to get a full accounting of all the debits, of all the payments versus all the payments by the vendors or the people and the expenditures. We've had none of that. So I don't believe I've seen it. I have not seen it from you know, we've had one occasion that the administration has provided to us. I'm thankful for that. That's a change. But I think that there's more conversations about managing this revolving account in a better way. And I think this is a way to ensure that we have those conversations. Because if we don't do something to ensure it, then there's no accountability for making it happen.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion on the amendment on the floor? All right, hearing none, we'd have a roll call vote on the amendment.
Roll call on motion to reduce to $450,000. Councillor Harmon?
No.
Councillor Khan?
No.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
No.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
No.
Councillor Granis?
No.
Councillor Cameron?
No.
Motion fails.
So the main motion is on the floor to approve.
Correct.
Further
Motion to
discussion?
approve.
It's already there. It's already on the floor.
Yeah,
Oh,
motion approved on the floor.
So we vote now?
Yes.
We could, unless somebody would like to do further discussion.
No.
I take that as a roll call request?
It'll be a roll call then.
Okay, motion to approve. Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
No.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
No.
Councillor Zede?
No.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Proceed.
Motion to approve Order 580, which is, okay, thank you, which is a gift acceptance in the amount of $1,112. The memo sort of says it, but in 2023, the Institution for Savings helped collect donations for a plaque for Pete's Corner in honor of the recent late Pete Pollard, who passed away in 2022. Now these additional funds are basically to buy a granite bollard to place at the corner there. The committee was in favor. We did specifically ask if accessibility will be addressed, namely in the placement of the bollard relative to the width of the sidewalk. The DPS director, and they are the SPON staff contact on this, did state that that would be taken into account, and so it was a 3-0 by the committee to accept.
Thank you. Any discussion on Pete's Corner plaque? Hearing none, roll call, and we might be absent Councillor Khan here, but let's go for it.
Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan is absent. Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron? Okay.
Yes.
911.
Okay, motion to approve Order 581, municipal fee schedule. So just to foreshadow here, I'm going to explain what's going on here, but then I'm going to make a motion to continue this to tomorrow, and I'll explain why. So this was an effort some years ago to condense all of the fees into an appendix in our muni code, in our municipal code. And so as a result, obviously, it needs to be kept up to date. So this is that effort this year. It is to reflect some fees that have already been changed by the city council, such as the harbor master $50 dock fee we did a few months ago. You recall, we also changed the city clerk's office parking clerk, really in this case, the visitor permit from $5 a day to $25 a year. And now you have some new fees that are changes, I should say, really, that are proposed. The first bulk of them, really 1 through 4, relate to burials and cemeteries, and so it's summer fees and winter fees, the cost for a cremation, a weekend additional charge, etc. These are all coming primarily from DPS, just trying to align better fees with costs, essentially. These are not high volume fees, and that was explained in committee largely because there frankly aren't that many plots available or left in Newburyport's public cemeteries, if you will, so they do not get used heavily, but when they do, these are the fee proposals here. Then you have a couple that are really related to streets. So you have a street opening trench with a change going from $100 plus $2 a square foot to $175 plus $240 a square. Curb cuts going from $100 to $150, and right-of-way occupancy, say if you needed to put a dumpster in the street for a period of time, $50 a week to $75 a week for the first 40 feet, and then an additional. The reason that I'm going to continue this till tomorrow is we really need the water sewer rates to settle in order to really not have to do this again. And the trash and recycling fees also need to settle, which may come later this meeting, but in the interest of continuing to move. So with that, hopefully you know what the fees are, so we won't do the new ones tomorrow. We'll just basically plug in at the end of the night whatever the water sewer fees are and whatever comes out tonight from trash and recycle, particularly for the bulk stickers. So motion to continue to a date certain, and that date certain would be June 25th, tomorrow, and we will take it up at the conclusion of the evening, if that's okay.
So motion is to table. Has been seconded.
By Councilor Harmon.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I think, as they say, that's non-debatable. Anyway, so let's have a roll call on that.
Motion to continue to a date certain, Order 581. Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane. Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
Yes.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis. Yes. Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Councilor Lane, are you there?
I thought I heard him.
Okay.
All right, motion collectively to approve transfer 195 and 196.
Second.
195 is long-term debt principal 28.5 to highway fuel tanks maintenance 20,800 and highway fuel oil 5,000. And 196 is the same source, but also interest, so long-term principal 30,700 and interest 69,270, 50 cents to highway maintenance drainage 99,970, 50. So transfer 195 is basically, as you may know, at Perry Way we maintain essentially a gas station for city vehicles to fill up. This funds would be used to enhance, particularly the vapor recovery, I think, to maintain compliance on that. So, and we've had some considerable conversations over the last several weeks about long-term debt principal and why it became available, because we didn't take on debt that we were anticipating. So there became some slack in both that and the interest line. 196 is the same source, but add in interest. The drainage is really primarily referring to the culvert failure on Hale Street that occurred and had to be repaired on an emergency basis. At the time, they quote-unquote stole from other lines in order to facilitate that, but obviously you can only do that for so long. There was also a collapse on Water Street where water flows in the river, and that also had to be dealt with on an emergency basis. And unfortunately, they added up to almost $100,000. So that is the purpose. Both of these were 3-0 in committee.
Okay. Any further discussion on?
Collectively,
Transfer
195, 196.
96, okay. Seeing none, I believe Councilor Lane is no longer with us. So these heard from him text-wise. So I think we could just do a voice vote.
oh, very good
Transfer.
point. All in favor of that?
Aye.
I mean,
Sure.
sorry.
Those opposed? Okay, so.
Didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
All right, Mr. President, so that's it for budget and finance business. Tomorrow's obviously the big night for budget and CIP. I'm really happy to say I think I'm going to cancel Thursday's standing meeting of budget. We really need the break. My colleagues and everybody has put in a ton of time. I'll talk more about that tomorrow. If needed, we might add a right before City Council July 13th meeting if there's a transfer that the administration says they really need. And then just to foreshadow beyond that, we do still have quite a bit in our committee, unfortunately. We have the Whittier SOI, we have the Curtis Fund, and part of me canceling Thursday is I can't pull those attendees in fast enough anyways, and in addition to needing the break. So we will be at it tomorrow night, and then we will take a much-needed Thursday off, and thank you to my colleagues.
Thank you and the committee. A lot of hard work there, and we're halfway up Mount Everest, and we'll get to the summit tomorrow night. Okay. Community Services, Councillor Preston is still absent. I don't know if there was any other report. There's nothing coming out of.
We didn't. Councillor Donahue said they did not meet.
Okay. All right. General government, we did meet before. I know a number of you were here. We had a really, I think, spirited, good discussion, a lot of public comment. So this was on the Communication 550 regarding human resources and the library situation. And what we are going to do is committee members and those who were in attendance as a committee of the whole felt that moving forward on a third-party investigator makes sense both for letting people know in the community that it's been taken seriously, so to have somebody unbiased. I have been working on a timeline and some thoughts on how the situation transpired, but it is there's just a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different timelines, and merging them together is beyond my capacity. And so I'll be speaking with our city solicitor on how to approach that and come back to general government and at our next meeting in the full council, just with a scope of services, get a handle on how much this would cost. So the scope would include what we want, what we could eventually make public, and hopefully we would be able to make as much public as we can that might help people understand what can we learn from what transpired, and just take it from there. So that's the update. Nothing to vote on tonight out of general government. That would lead us to licenses and permits.
Council President, if it pleases, maybe we could do planning and development, because we have someone here that's been waiting all night for an appointment.
I think that would be fine with me. We'll go to planning and development.
You can do them all if you like. It doesn't matter.
All right.
And Mr. Coop, if you can still stay longer if you want, but we're giving you the easy way out.
3 hours is enough.
All right. So we'll do you want to just do that appointment, or would you we'll do planning and development?
Motion to approve appointment 490, Bob Coop to the planning board.
Second.
All right, so thank you, Mr. Coop, for being here for the last 3 hours. We appreciate your service. So we had a planning development committee meeting last week. A spirited discussion, of course, always comes up about short-term rental units anytime we have a planning board appointment. But Mr. Coop answered the questions that Councillor Preston asked. And Mr. Coop's been on the board for many years. He is, as Mr. Taylor stated, a valued member of the committee. So we did vote 1 present, 1 supporting, and 1 on the train, muted and unable to attend.
That'd be me.
And we are rejoined by Councillor Lane. Hello, Councillor Lane. So we're at appointment. We've shifted to planning and development because one appointee has been here for a long evening. So that's appointment 490, Robert Coop. And then we are going to finish up with the rest of planning and development, then go back to licenses and permits. Councillor Shand had made a motion to approve that was seconded, I believe, by somebody, Councillor McCauley. And any further discussion or any discussion on Robert Coop's appointment? Hearing none. Roll call.
Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Shand.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
No.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis,
Yes.
and Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Coop.
Thank you, Mr. Coop.
All right, moving right along. Let's motion to approve appointment 492, Scott Clark.
Second.
Mr. Clark did come in. He has a historic home on Winter Street, and as part of the process of redoing his home, he became acquainted with the Historical Commission and other local boards in the community, and he wanted to give back. With his experience, we agreed that he had plenty to discuss with the Historical Commission, and we voted 2 yes and 1, again, muted on the train.
All right, any further discussion on Scott Clark appointment to the Historical Commission? Seeing none, roll call.
Councilor Harmon?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane? Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Dunning?
Yes.
Councilor Granis?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, let's do the easy one. Motion to receive and file collectively communications 549, 530, and 540.
Second.
These are all the communications that Director Port gave us during the MBTA Communities effort. Now that we have gone through the order that we approved last time around, these are beyond needs, and we voted 3-0 probably earlier in the month to receive and file all three.
Okay. Motion to collectively receive and file communications 549, 530, and 540. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilor Harmon?
Yes.
Councilor Khan?
Yes.
Councilor Lane? Councilor Lane?
Yes.
Councilor McCauley?
Yes.
Councilor Shan?
Yes.
Councilor Wright?
Yes.
Councilor Zede?
Yes.
Councilor Donahue?
Yes.
Councilor Granis? Councilor Cameron? Thank you.
All right, last but not least, motion to approve ordinance 172 as amended in committee.
Second.
So this is the long-awaited ordinance that would allow a community center to be built in the I-1 district. We had the conversation prior to the last meeting where there was an additional request to have an amendment put in, which is as reads here. Furthermore, this use allowance shall expire, sunset, automatically on August 1st, 2027, unless a building permit has been obtained by the applicant for said use prior to such date. We think that met the needs of one of the councilors from the committee, and we voted out of committee 2 to approve, and again, 1 muted on the train.
Any discussion? Councilor Zede?
Thank you. I have four questions, perhaps rhetorical, perhaps not, but I'll ask all 4 of them. So my first question is, so my understanding about this proposal is the genesis of this proposal is that the next logical step in this process is to go to a board and spend several months basically applying for permits. That's how I understand it. Where does it say in our ordinance that that practice can't happen, that event can't occur without the zoning being in place?
Okay. We do have Director Port here with his hand raised, and if you could unmute yourself, Director Port, that would be great.
Can you hear me, Councilor?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Just to answer the question briefly, the zoning ordinance does not permit someone to apply for permits for a use that isn't authorized in the zoning ordinance. Here, the zoning administrator would not be directing an applicant, in this case the city, to the planning board for site plan approval if that use is not listed as such.
No, I understand the claim. I'm asking where is it in the ordinance? I can't, maybe I'm missing it. I don't see it in Unicode. So, all right, it's okay. I'm just asking these questions. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 would be, if we have a soft cost, let's call it, we have a soft cost number, that was the subject of much discussion in budget and finance. We don't have consensus on that soft cost number, but we do have a general, I think, agreement, or at least tacit agreement by some, maybe not all, that the final cost is likely to be higher. Then what's the justification to a taxpayer that we continue this process and expend the next 3 to 5 months sending staff, architects, and plans before a board to apply for a project that we haven't even really agreed on? So maybe that's somewhat of a rhetorical question, but I'd love to have that debate. I'm not familiar with any project where one would blindly pay their team, if you will, competent as they may be, to go stand before a board for several meetings, as this would take, to do site plan review, which is ostensibly the bulk of the process at this juncture. That leads me to my third question: what is the cost? So I think there's also an assumption that this is free, or that somehow this has already been baked into something else. So what is the cost in staff time, consultant time, architect time in preparing and defending this application before the planning board? And finally, it's interesting to me, two things. One is this proposal is to allow a community center in an industrial zone. I mean, maybe that passes the smell test for others. I'm just, I get it. I've seen Low Street, so yes, I do understand what Low Street looks like, but that's what the proposal states. It also states that it's by permit, it's permitted, not by special permit. So the bulk of this requirement that one would have to follow to do this is merely a site plan review, which is, as is known well by those who have done many zoning ordinances, is a much lower standard than a special permit. For example, does this proposal require that a proper independent traffic study be done, or can you just kind of make it up as you go along? So those are some of my questions, perhaps to spark a debate, or perhaps to make it clear that I won't be supporting this.
Okay. Director Port, did you have any comments on any of the, particularly the last one, which referenced a traffic study?
Sure, yeah, actually, just wanted to add one supplemental element to the first question that Councilor G had. Recall, of course, that not everything is actually codified explicitly in the ordinance. Some of that's actually captured in state law or case law and things like that, so it's not, you might not be seeing language of that of that nature. With respect to a traffic study, and I fully expect that the planning board will be looking at both pedestrian and vehicular circulation in that area, from crossing, say, from the school to the site, if that would be permitted at that Low Street site. But here the planning board can and typically will be requiring a traffic study as part of that, and I imagine we'll be looking at the full pattern of sidewalks and crosswalks and things like that, in addition to the traffic flow itself.
Councilor Z?
No, I do understand that they may. It does not mean they shall. And I believe when Atkinson Common was done, for example, they assented, which basically meant they said whatever the city council said is fine. I don't remember processing a traffic study. It's not something we typically do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. Hearing none. Roll call.
Motion to approve ordinance 171 as amended. Councilor Harmon.
It's point of order, 172?
172.
172.
Ordinance 172 as amended in committee.
Am I right?
Ordinance, yeah, 172,
What did I say?
171.
Plus one.
Plus one.
Sorry about that.
Just trying to
Can't
see if
read my
anyone
own
was
writing.
paying attention.
Councilor Harmon.
Yes.
Councilor Khan.
Yes.
Councilor Lane.
Yes.
Councilor McCauley.
Yes.
Councilor Shan.
Yes.
Councilor Wright.
Yes.
Councilor Zede.
No.
Councilor Donahue.
Yes.
Councilor Granis.
Yes.
Councilor Cameron.
Yes.
Ordinance passes first reading.
We'll take that up again.
Thank you.
Councilor Shand?
So that's it for planning and development. We did get 2 appointments tonight. We'll look at to doing that on July the 2nd unless my committee members want a week off as well. That pretty much takes everything except the communications on the signage from Mr. McCarthy. We'll take care of that sometime this summer as well. So that's it for planning and development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Moving back to licenses and permits, Councilor Wright.
Thank you, Council President. I'd like to make a motion to approve application 204, 209, 211, and 213.
Second.
Thank you. So for all of these applications, all the paperwork and insurance is in place, so we can see that that's all done. And then I'll go through each one individually. So the Greek Food Festival is from July 26th to the 28th. As many of you are familiar with, that's a staple around town. There's no real significant changes. It's going to be the same as it's always been. And so this was recommended out of committee 3-0 to approve. The next application is a block party on Lafayette Street, August 3rd. This is also something that revolves around the fireworks for Yankee Homecoming. It's also one that's been in existence before, and it is request the closure of the streets between Highland Avenue and High Street. Lafayette Street is up in the vicinity of the hospital, for those of you who might need a refresher. Application 211 is the Jeannie Geiger Center Walk Against Domestic Violence. That's scheduled for Sunday, October 6th, from 9 to 12 around Waterfront Park. They were pleased to inform us that they've gotten all the approvals from the other bodies, from the parks and from the Waterfront Trust, or they will be applying for those. And they're happy that their route now will connect their rail trails together through the Waterfront Park. The application 213 is for sidewalk tent applications in front of the storefront for Soak and Shoreline. They're commonly owned. They will be cognizant of keeping the access through the sidewalks available to everybody, and they'll be taking the tents down as needed. One of the locations they're only going to have during the sidewalk sales. So the one will stay up and one will only be available, will only be up during the sidewalk sales portion. So all of those applications were referred out of committee with a 3-0 recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on collectively those 4 applications? Councillor Donahue?
Yes, thank you. Is there any way to remove that last one so it doesn't have to be collective?
No, you can
213?
you can speak to it.
Okay, yeah, no, because I'm not going to support that one, so I don't know how to vote collectively on one that I don't support and the rest I do.
No. You could remove application 2013
I'm happy to
from the
remove it.
original motion, and
yes.
we'll vote on the other 3 collectively.
So we'll vote on.
Yeah.
So we'll vote on 204, 209, 211, and we'll hold the others.
If your second agrees to that.
It was a second, yeah, I'm good.
Thank you, Councillor McCauley. All right, so we're on those 3.
Correct.
Group food, block party,
those
Lafayette.
4. 3. Sorry, 3.
3, yep.
04, 09, and 11.
Okay, all right. So without any further discussion, because there is none, all those in roll call.
Well, Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron? Okay.
Yes, okay, now we could do,
Motion to approve application 213.
Second.
so you gave the explanation, now Councillor Donahue, go for it.
Thank you. Okay. So the reason I'm standing in opposition to this is because I am just not in support of A-frames or tents on narrow sidewalks. That is pretty much going to be my position moving forward every time this comes up, so I'm just going to throw that out there. Thank you.
Okay.
For the access reason, it's just bad access all the time.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion on application 213? Councillor Harmon?
Thank you. So it looks like there's a tent over the door and then there's a tent to the left. Can you just tell me which one is the sort of permanent and which one's just for sidewalk sale?
So the one that is on the corner
Yep.
is going to be the permanent one. And the one next to it will be for the sidewalk sales.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call.
So on approving application 213, Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
No.
Councillor Granis? Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Motion to approve application 212.
Second.
Okay, this is a little misleading in the way that it's titled. It's not really a parklet. There's no parklet, physical parklet. So what they're asking for is the ability to serve food and alcohol in front of their place of business, as indicated on the application. So, so there's no fees being collected for a parklet necessarily. All the insurance information, the application, all the sign-offs are in place for this application. It was recommended out of committee 3-0.
Discussion?
Yeah, just a point of clarification. Their application is for the street part of In-Street, and so therefore they're actually in the street, and they will have a fee associated with their square footage going forward.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Donahue?
Thank you. I'm just going to rise, again, in opposition. I am not in support of the parklets at this point in any way, shape, or form. Dining on our public ways is something that has just become too challenging for too many people, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? All right. Hearing no further discussion while Councillor Wright's batteries are being charged, we'll have a roll call.
Roll call on approving application 212. Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
No.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Council President. That's all we have for this evening.
You may want to be prepared with Rule 2B, depending on how
I'm ready. I'm ready.
quickly
He's ready.
Public Works and Safety goes. Actually, why don't we invoke Rule B now, 2B now, because we've got just one thing that we'll discuss.
Well, why don't I make a motion to proceed past 10:30?
Second.
Is there a second? All right, roll call.
Roll call on proceeding past 10:30. Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis? Councillor Cameron?
All right, yes.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor McCauley.
Ye have little faith. I'd like to make a motion to approve appointment 491. This is a reappointment of Brian Brunault as a constable. Brian was present at the meeting. He has a long history with the city as a police and safety officer, over 35 years. Since retirement, he's been a constable working in the Essex County and throughout the state. His role as constable is to be a server of legal notice to do investigative work. The committee recommended 3-0 to approve.
Thank you, Councillor McCauley. Any discussion on reappointment of Brian Bruneau? Hearing none, roll call.
Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis? Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion to approve Order 572.
Second.
This is to have Land Pro as a licensed contractor, Land Pro as a sidewalk contractor. The owner, Mike Giorgio, was present at the meeting. His application was referenced by the city's DPS director. He had notes from Merrimack, Amesbury, and Tewksbury. Mike states that a large part of his business today is working in Newburyport for contractors. And so he had all of the right insurance, he had a bond payment, all of that paperwork was in order. He'd like to start doing work for the city as opposed to through contractors as well. As I said, the DPS director had recommended him, we had recommended him 3-0 for approval as a licensed contractor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor McCauley. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call on Order 572.
Councillor Harmon?
Yes.
Councillor Khan?
Yes.
Councillor Lane?
Yes.
Councillor McCauley?
Yes.
Councillor Shan?
Yes.
Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Councillor Zede?
Yes.
Councillor Donahue?
Yes.
Councillor Granis?
Yes.
Councillor Cameron?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion to receive and file Order 449, a shared street grant.
Second.
This was submitted back in April of 2023. This was the original funding to do a traffic calming on High Street. It was supposed to mirror that down by Marches Hill. We had a new deputy director who didn't think that was actually going to work. We repurposed that grant into a safety measure at High and Myrtle at Olives. We think that's been a better design and infrastructure. We, the council, had approved a sidewalk 2.5 years ago in that particular area, so we didn't necessarily have to go back with the design once we got it okayed with the abutters on both sides, and they were very particular about their needs. So this order is no longer needed because the design was repurposed, and so we're just asking to receive and file it. Thank you.
Sounds good. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, roll call.
Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley. Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis. Councillor Cameron. Thank you.
Yes.
Motion to approve ordinance 173.
Second.
This ordinance is new to Chapter 8. It will establish a new chapter, Chapter 4, Trash Rules and Regulations. The committee time that was spent on this was reviewing line by line the various definitions and regulations being proposed to codify the rules of trash. This is not to be confused with our waste disposal contract, not to be confused with our pickup and hauling contract. These are just rules and regulations that we want to define as to how that works upon, how we want to communicate with the public about this. So the changes of note, the introduction of the 64-gallon trash limit. This is down from 96. There's an overthrow bag program, not to be confused with pay-as-you-throw. That's a different type of structure altogether. It's an overthrow bag program to capture the additional trash volume, and a change to the bulk sticker price from $5 to $10. I know it says in our Muni code that we want Muni fund fees. We wanted to change that to $15, but the committee stuck to $10. And we created a process by which residents on private roads could petition the city and the city council for inclusion into our trash program, but not have the city roads actually approved going forward, right? That was part of their design and their planning board approval, et cetera, along the way. So with all of that, the committee voted 3-0 to approve it. There were some additional contingencies that I want to explain to you, why you might see them. We asked for a design and communication plan about how we were going to communicate these changes to the public. That's in our packet tonight, and as communication 560. There was 559, communication 559, which we received and filed, which was an overview presentation we had asked for to make sure that anyone reading that and would know exactly what the changes were. Those two documents will be posted on the city website going forward. And I did provide to all of you a red line copy, so you saw the agony we went through in trying to cut and paste and get all this through. This was reviewed by legal as well, and they had those comments as well.
Great, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Motion to approve first reading, ordinance 173. Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
Councillor Granis. Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
Excellent.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we can rescind Rule 2B.
My apologies for wasting the council's time.
We could have been done 25 Is there any good of the order other than go home and get rested up?
Yeah, I gotta go to the
Motion to adjourn.
Sorry.
I missed that.
I just want to throw it out there that, we have 3 different ordinances referencing our sidewalks, and I'd really like to tackle, codifying that into one and making it a little more streamlined. If anyone wants to, co-sponsor or help me with that, just reach out to me offline, and I think that's something we could tackle this year. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made and seconded. Roll call.
Councillor Harmon.
Yes.
Councillor Khan.
Yes.
Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor McCauley.
Yes.
Councillor Shan.
Yes.
Councillor Wright.
Yes.
Councillor Z.
Yes.
Councillor Donahue.
Yes.
I want to take my time here.
10:29 on the dot. Cameron,
Councillor
yes.
Kranis.
Yes.
And Councillor Cameron.
Yes.
10:29.
Okay, thank you, everybody, and see you tomorrow at 7.